And we are live. Hello, all. It is a Friday night, and this is a Pontificators night. So, as always, we have our illustrious guests. We have Todd Mulrooney. How you doing, Todd?
You're doing good. Sorry, that was noise from my room. My fault.
No big. We have Chester Busby III,
Yo, 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 baby, in the house.
and we got a pair of feet that's a young lad, and I believe this young lad is named Zach.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here.
Hey, Zach Bradley, what's up? And then we have the man just known as Durakin. That's it.
Hello.
That's all we
Yep.
know him by.
Yep. That's
We'll
all you
never
need to
know
know me
any
by.
more about him other than that. So
Right.
how's your week been? How you guys been doing? Hello?
It's been great. It's been very good. I think the trouble is we don't know who to start. It's been a very good week. I've had a great time. How about you?
Me,
Oh.
I've had a great week, and Art, you even talked about it a little bit. I
There
heard
you go.
Well, was
over
it?
on Ethan's stream.
Yeah. I guess they sound like who's your go-to on that? Is it Terrific Comics? Is that?
Yeah, that's the publisher's, I don't know, name right now. He's not going to redo like Comico or anything like that, so it's called Terrific Productions.
Is it Rev? Is that his name?
Yeah, Andrew Rev.
Yeah, so I guess he's been in contact with Ethan. So I didn't have too much to say. Or did I? I don't remember.
A little bit.
Uh-oh, did I say bad things? I said bad things about that guy, but not about...
The article was really misleading. He wasn't saying the page rate was $22.73. He was saying save from whatever your page rate is. It was, whether you're getting $100 or $200 or $300. He was saying if you save this per page per month, assuming you do a 20-page or 22-page book, then over 20 years it would be $1 million. But the
also,
article
it was $22 per month?
No,
If you were-
$22 per page. $22 per page. If you were to save $22 per page
You'd be
for
broke.
a 20-year career, you would end up with $1 million.
How many people could save $22 when their page rate is like $60?
Well, I hope it's not $60 at DC.
Yeah, but we're talking about Terrific Comics. I mean, how much is that guy paying people?
It's more than $60.
All right, Todd, you have to tell us how much is it.
I can't tell you.
Come on,
It's
man.
up there with- you know what? I've worked for a $60 page rate for Zenoscope, and it's right there with IDW and Boom and stuff like that.
So $60 is your page rate.
No, my page rate is double that.
Ooh, see, I got him. I committed. I got him to commit. So if it's $120, then you save $20 of that, and then by the end of 40 years, you'll have $1 million.
Mm.
Is that high risk or is that low risk investment?
Geez, banks these days? I don't know. You have to ask Chester, because Chester will talk, the banking system and what does he call it? Well, fiat. The fiat. I don't even know what fiat means, but he always says that term.
I would never invest.
I say fiat currency.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh,
banks are
look-
not going to get any kind of return. You have to actually make some real investments. Banks will barely have you keep up with inflation as far as their interest rates.
Okay, but who does 50,000 pages?
50,000
Ooh.
pages at $20 a page.
He
Yeah,
did the
that's-
math really quick.
Is that how it would take you? Did you say it'd take you 50,000 pages to make $1 million?
If you're just saving $20 out of it.
Holy crap! That's a lot
Yeah.
of pages.
Get to drawing, Art.
It's a drawing.
You got to factor in interest at a certain rate. Like if you did it with like a credit union or something like that. It wasn't.
Yeah, I
it was,
can't do the math on it, but it's like 2% per year with that. So
Well, I hate to burst the bubble on this concept,
that
but
was an economic joke.
Oh,
I got
it
it.
was good. I didn't even realize
Yeah.
it myself.
Got it.
But this is exactly the same thing that every creator actually does when they make a book, because after you create the book, you make the initial investment, you can continue selling that book, because especially when it comes to a comic book, that art that has to go into it is a huge initial investment and outlay. And so once you have that done, you can continue just to print the book and sell the book, and you keep getting it back. It's like having royalties available to you. Every creator has this. That's what Marvel and DC has been doing. What Todd's talking about here is now that the artist is now invested in his own book that he's now drawing, basically, which is what I've told my own artist. I've said, hey, it's not just me putting the investment into this, you're putting investment into this, and I want to go into that concept together. And you're going to get the better this does, the more return you're going to receive in return. And so now he's invested as much as I am.
Yeah,
right?
but
Am
it
I right,
would be
Todd?
cool. I was just thinking about this. It'd be cool if that Terrific Comics or Terrific Entertainment actually put $20 aside for you guys as a retirement or something like that. Now that would be cool, because some companies do that.
Well, I can tell you this: I get a decent page rate for where I'm at in the industry, and I get royalties if my book gets over a certain point. And it's not the same. It's not the same as, you know. Well, I know what it used to be. I think it's 17,000 nowadays. So if you hit over 17,
in sales as far as their break even, and then your royalties start after 17,000 books sold, right?
Well, mine are a little lower than that, but I think the industry standard I remember hearing somewhere was around 17,000. That because it used to be 40,000, right? When books were like 60, 70 cents and $1. I think it was 40,000 that you had to hit before you actually.
I think the highest I ever heard was like 30.
30?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I get a royalty after a certain point, which is lower than 17, and it's not. I mean, there are companies that don't have royalties at all because you're just, they don't factor them in. And there are some companies that have royalties, obviously, but it's a good system. It's not bad.
No, I'm not knocking it, but just if anybody's listening in, they probably have no idea what we're talking about. So, what is the article? So, once they're done here, they can go check out the article and find out more. Do you know what the article was, Todd?
Yeah, it was a Bleeding Cool article that picked up on some tweets. It was written by Jude Terror, and basically, Andrew had done some tweets on his Terrific handle, whatever you want to call it, and they talked about if you're an artist and you save $22.73 of your page rate, no matter what it is, no matter what your page rate is per page, if you're doing a 22-page book over the course of 20 years in your career, you would save $1 million. Now, I don't know what he had factored for interest and all that, and where you would get that kind of interest, but it could have been something like a credit union or something like that. And that's basically what the article talked about. So we had a couple of tweets, and of course, sometimes he gets into a little bit of a tweet back and forth, like a lot of people, and some people thought, "Oh, you're crazy," and they didn't really get what he was saying and stuff like that. And what kind of math are you using? What's this fuzzy math or something? So it got picked up, and they created an article out of it.
Yeah, so it would be roughly $400 a month that you would be putting aside if it was a 20-page book and you got that done in that month, right? So you'd be saving $400 a month. So that would add up after X amount of years, you'd have $1 million.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I don't know how many people can give up $400 extra a month, but if they can, then God bless them. So anyway, that's that. You guys should check that out after the show. Not right now, but after the show. So the topic, and this came from Drucken, as far as the Pontificators show is concerned, it is how important is canon? So we are going to do a round robin discussion, and each one of us are going to have our points of view, and we're going to talk this thing to death because that's what we do here on Pontificators.
We pontificate.
Yeah, we do. So you want to start, Durakan, or have we lost him? He's muted.
No, I'm here. I don't know. I think that canon is semi-important, like, because that's how you get the how you make people feel things and everything like that. Well, you don't necessarily need it for making people feel anything, but it makes those stronger emotions and makes the bigger impacts, and you can set things up more long term and get those a greater connection out of things.
Well, let me back up for a minute. What gave you the idea, and what was kind of the reason for bringing this to the six of us? What were you thinking?
You asked for ideas.
Yeah.
I did. Yeah, but I mean, did you have a deeper thought about it? I mean,
Well, he didn't catch that handoff at all. Well, shoo, right over the head.
No, not really.
Well, it's been in the, been in the news.
Actually,
the comics news, that is. This canon idea.
Oh, so it's been written in articles and stuff lately?
Yeah, it's been kind of rumored here and there, and it's been talked about, like, is canon necessary because of what is happening in Marvel and DC. I happened upon an article somewhere back in the week. I can't point you to it, but I remember happening upon one where it talks about whether or not they even need to stick with the old stories in the canon, and whether or not there's any merit to that. Is it important where we have new readers coming on board? We can just come up with new stories, and do we have to stick with what's happened in the past? And so I thought it was actually a pretty well-timed topic for Durakan to say that. Yeah,
I think it's a good topic, but I think it has a very simple answer.
What's the simple answer?
Don't you dare touch it. I mean, it's pretty simple. All done. Thank you. Nice guy. Nice seeing you guys. No, I mean, come on. It's canon. You either stick to the canon or make a new story. Do something new. Make a new IP, which we keep asking people to do, and which some people do, like Mr. R.T. Bear here and his Chrono Mechanics. But yeah, wink, wink. It's actually a pretty cool looking book. But no, of course you stick to canon. It's sacrilege otherwise. I mean, what's the point?
What is the importance of, like, Robin's origin being that he went through, like, it was Dick Grayson who was had his parents killed, and Batman came and helped him, and he stopped Dick Grayson from killing his villains, versus the actual origin being that it's Bruce Wayne's identity when he was a kid, learning from the top detective in his field. Does it matter which one is the origin story of the Robin name?
It depends what is locked down by the creators as being canon, right? Now, Batman is a really good example, actually. Thank you for bringing it up, Dragon, because Batman was a carbon copy of the Shadow when he came out. And for quite a while, Batman was not Batman. He's not at all what you would see as Batman. And it took them a while to figure out exactly who it would be. I mean, we can go back and look at Superman as well. Same kind of thing. It took them a while to figure out what Superman was. But once they did, and once they locked that down, that became canon. Canon isn't necessarily the first idea that came out. It is what the creator finishes with, what the creator's polished project, polished idea is. That's what canon is, right?
That's true. Yeah.
Do you think canon can change or be redefined over years?
It can expand, but it cannot be redefined. No.
Okay. So you could never say, like, you know, Batman's parents, like Bruce Wayne's parents, were not murdered. That would just be the worst thing.
That would be sacrilegious. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about not the non-creator messing with someone else's work, right? That's what we're talking about, right? Because the creator is free to do what they want with their work. Therefore, they are canon can be in flux when it comes from the creator's hand. But we're talking about other people taking other people's previous work and labor and love. And stop it. Stop disrespecting things. Stop rewriting everything. Stop making things that fit into your area, which you think is right. Stop it. Either do what the person created or make something new.
Well, what would be a good example of a character that has gone off the rails as far as straying too
Captain
far
Marvel.
from canon?
Captain Marvel.
Captain Marvel.
Marvel.
Oh,
Oh, Captain Marvel's way off base. Yeah. Good point.
Which Captain Marvel? The Miss Marvel, the Marvel version, or Shazam?
Miss
Anyone
Marvel.
that
Miss
has,
Marvel.
yes, any one of them that is a female has really gone off the reservation. And not that I don't
Yeah,
like female
unfortunately.
characters. I don't mean to make it sound like that, but Captain Marvel was a character that was a man and had a death that was very important and planned. One of the first ones that was planned, right? Because that was the very first graphic novel that Marvel did, was the death of Captain Marvel, I think.
I
Unless it
have that. Yeah.
God Kills or whatever it was, but it was one of those. So that was very early on, and it was sort of like, this was the idea of the creator, Jim Starlin, to do. And then what do you know? And then we have, multiple versions. You have, I don't know how many different. You got Captain Marvel that was in the Avengers, which was a black female, good character, and it would have been better. It would have been better just staying right there, and her existing as that character. Because that was like, hey, her powers are a little different. Her origin was way different. And it would have been more of like a homage. Like, I take this name as my own because there's like a need for there to be a Captain Marvel. But you know what I mean? And then they just warped it from there.
Yes.
Wouldn't the argument
may I?
against... Go ahead.
May I
Yes, go ahead.
respond to a comment from the chat, if I may? May I? Eric Hawkins here has made a very soft belly comment. I'd like to thank. Oh, Art is on it. He's reading my mind. That's awesome, dude. At what point should, if canon, be altered to reflect the current age, such as Batman or Superman, because a younger generation does not relate to it, to the 1930s? You know what? That is the same type of drivel that gets everyone in line to change something. Here's the thing: it's either timeless or it's not. If it's not timeless, then don't mess with it. Make something new.
Well, I guess for me, what comes up is what really is canon, and would it change generationally speaking? Like, what can be changed and what cannot be changed? You know what I mean? Because, like you said, Chester, earlier, it took a little bit of time to evolve, like, say, Superman or Batman. Even the radio show and the TV show contributed to those two IPs. So if there's still room to change canon, even up to the 60s for somebody like Batman, then where does the line get drawn? Can you still mess with canon? Where should the line be drawn? And who should draw it? Because I think that's probably the bigger question, is how far can you take it, or how far should you take it? Or should you take it there at all?
I'm going to devil's advocate a little bit later, but for right now, I have to absolutely say that this canon, especially going with Marvel, I've got to stick right here for a moment, because Todd was right. Captain Marvel in the Marvel universe, the Kree warrior scientist on Earth, everything he went to as an outsider on another planet, they were after him. They came for him. He then adopted Earth. It was a huge event then that he died. And when he died, this Carol Danvers that he was with, that appropriated some powers from the relationship, then she went on to become Captain Marvel once again as an homage to him. And that, once again, that added more depth to the character, and the story grew even bigger. Of course, we know what happened with Carol. It was kind of a troubled figure to write in comics, and she ended up in a coma from Rogue. You want to talk about once again, another great story. Here, this character comes from a low villainous aspect. Now she becomes heroic through this concept. Carol comes around. You do have the black Captain Marvel that come out. All of this still is grounded in this story going all the way back to Marvel, and you lose all of that when you just say, you know what, let's just do something different because we want to. Because
Yeah, right.
nobody else knows any of that, so we're not going to go with that.
Yeah, no, they
Instead,
don't seem to. They don't seem to know the word progression.
right?
Well, did you guys
Oh.
read Rhaegar's the values of the character must remain the same, even if the zeitgeist changes.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I think in a nutshell that, that would be it, right? I mean, could we all agree on that part?
Yeah.
No, not quite. I would say the cores have to change, but not exactly the values themselves. Because if you if you go back to the very beginning of Batman's origin, there's a core character there that you have to have a specific type of personality to go, I never want this to happen to anyone else again. Not it can't happen to me again, and protect yourself from that, but not anyone else again. And there's a difference there. And then he has to go and commit to that and go on all those adventures to learn everything. That's a different thing than, like, that's not just values, that's a core thing to his character. If you change that, then everything else breaks down. But you can change his values with, for example, you can give him a gun and he can still have that core. You can make him have a different view of how society should play out, and that's a different value, but it's still got his core there. Like, you can make him a tyrannical dictator, but it's still the same core character.
Yeah, but
Well,
you're
Dragon-
talking about
you can
evolution, right? You're
entertain
not
those
talking
stories.
about going back and rewriting the story. You're talking about evolving the character, right?
No, I'm saying that you could take that character, like what he is at his core, and you could like develop him in all these different ways. And as long as that core is there, you can say that that's still that character. But if you take that core away, then all those different directions that you could still go there, but that's not the same character.
Sounds
I
like
think
communist talk to me.
These two characters really kind of, once again, prove this point again. As Draken was saying, with Batman, you have that. With Captain Marvel, we have what we have now. Look how canon, observing the canon on these two characters, how Batman has been given to us now and where he's at versus Captain Marvel. That right there shows you the canon differences of the two characters and where it's at today.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think for me, the values and the character, or the core, I think the values can change for a story. Like Batman, since you brought Batman up, like Batman can have a difference in opinion for a story. Like he could actually entertain the idea of using a gun, and his values change. But then he would go back to his core, which would be he wouldn't use a gun. You know what I mean? Like you can entertain some of these ideas, but then always come back to the core of the character. And is the core maybe the most important part? Is that what you're saying, Durakan, versus the character? I mean, versus the value? Because if the core is always intact, then their values can change, but then they can always come back to that core for the sake of, like, if you wanted to entertain the thought of the character acting out of character, veering from their core, adapting to a different value, and then coming back to that core.
Well, I'm talking about in general, like when they adapt the characters. If you look at Batman Begins, I don't view that as Batman. Like that entire series, I don't view that as Batman because the core is different. Because the way that he was brought up is that he was living in fear or something like that, and he went to the mafia and he was about to kill the dude, and the Batman character would never do that.
But he wasn't Batman yet. He was Bruce Wayne.
But
Yeah,
that would
Batman
never have happened
that.
with Bruce Wayne even.
You're talking about the Nolan film, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but he was in development. He was still a diamond in the rough. He was still trying to figure things out. So his core wasn't even established at that point.
But that's what I'm saying. The core for him to have created the character, like the core for that character was established as the 10-year-old boy to make that decision to go and train.
You mean in the comic?
Yeah. For the character in the Nolan film, he hadn't made that decision at all. He ran away. That's not Bruce Wayne. That's not Batman at all.
Oh,
Well, it wasn't meant to. It was meant to be this version of Batman.
Right.
Right, and that's why it's a
One thing you got to let go of, and I try to tell people this all the time, is Hollywood is different. Their ego is so big that if you said, "Hey, please make a Dark Knight movie," well, they did, and that's as close as you're ever going to get to Frank Miller's Dark Knight. There's been pieces and bits and pieces that they have thrown in of Dark Knight into things, and you'll never get what you're looking for. So you got to separate the two and realize, okay, I get it. Hollywood does what it wants to do because their ego is so big they think they can outdo the source material. You know, rarely do you get something that's very close and it at least pays a lot of attention to it. Very rarely.
That was a good observation. Yeah. I mean, between film and comic books, it's a lot different. I think every time these things are adapted, these superhero concepts, Marvel, DC stuff, are adapted into different, like radio, like the radio show was different from the comic and so on and so on. And each one contributed parts to the mythology that were adaptable into, they brought into the comic books. I think some things worked and some things didn't. What was the one where Hal Jordan went nuts and killed all these people? What was he was possessed by
Parallax thing?
Parallax,
yeah,
and,
like to me that was like a crazy ass departure. Like that didn't work as a core character at all. But they did have him go off, and then I do believe when they brought Hal Jordan back, he almost seemed like a better character. So sometimes there are missteps, or what seems like missteps, but then there's like almost greatness that comes out of it years later. So these are all ongoing, mythology stories. So a lot of them have, 60, 70 years worth of history. So I guess, are we saying that as long as I guess this is what I'm trying to say, is it's okay to depart from some of this canon as long as you bring it back to whatever, or what Durakin's calling the core. As long as the core, you come back to it. So you can have characters veer off, and you can have characters that aren't quite what it seems like they acting in character or doing what they should do. But then they can learn a lesson and then come back to that core. Is this something that we can agree on, maybe?
Yeah, I think so. But let me give a really good example of what Todd and you have said. Captain America, the Marvel movie, right? We had an origin story that was pretty tight to the comic, to be fair. Actually.
Yeah.
And they kept going through. The story's great. As Captain America, being Captain America, sticking to be Captain America, fighting for the value, fighting for justice, etc., etc. And then we get up to this Endgame thing, and it's screeching halt. Yeah, well, I had an opportunity to went back in time and spent my entire life with a lady, and I didn't defend anybody. And it completely ripped the core out of Captain America, because Captain America would never do that.
Right.
So for me, up until that moment, I was very happy with what they're doing. But then once they went away from the core, as Draken has said, they screwed it up in an instant.
Yeah.
Right?
Dark Knight, that Todd said, was a very interesting point here too, because Frank Miller's The Dark Knight is not Batman as we had always known him, right? But what made Frank Miller's Dark Knight good and different, and we accepted it and we loved it, because there was a background to fall back on. That background was indeed the canon that we all knew and loved. And so when this version came out that broadened the canon, it was good.
Yeah. I think Eric has a good point here. Could the origin of a character be changed to be more relatable to a younger audience? Dick Grayson, for example, kids today don't know what the hell a circus or a trapeze artist is.
Oh, yeah, of course they do. They know what those things are. Come on.
Yeah, but they don't have them anymore. Not really.
Cirque du Soleil still does trapeze. Yeah.
No.
They
Not
can
really.
be
You would
changed,
have to
but
change it then. It couldn't be a
difficult.
traditional circus. It would have to be more of like a Cirque du Soleil, circus, right?
I mean, some of it you can, but it's kind of difficult because you want to get all the same like points that you're that for the character. So you would have to write it to pretty much emulate what you're losing and replace it with something so that it works out to be pretty much the same story, but not.
Just
Yeah, you could take out the elephants because
story
somehow
change.
they're offensive. Yeah, I
But
get it. Yeah.
but just to interject, how about this crazy idea about making a completely different character with a completely different backstory, where you could do whatever the hell you want? Why not just do that instead of trying to take a character that's already established and has a backstory canon and trying to relate it to a new audience? And these if they're going to go the mile of recreating the canon for a character, they might as well just do a new one, because their argument is that these kids don't know who this person is anyway.
Yes.
Good on you,
So-
young
so
lad.
it's like-
Very nice.
I was just like, what is the point? So
We applaud the young lad.
We do.
Well, I think you're bringing up a good point. That what if like how they change characters, like, okay, you have this. Oh, well, this is my point. This is my pet peeve, is when you have somebody like you have Peter Parker, right? And then you have this freak, crazy, once in a billion lifetimes freak accident happens, and he gets spider powers. And then there's a billion other Spider-Men that live. Like the same accident or the same thing was replicated more than once. Like there's Barry Allen, and then there's Wally West. Like the origin of those characters. Like, really, like, how did this freak accident happen twice? And that, for me, when they try to duplicate a character, or they try to create a new character, like, oh, well, this character is now Hispanic, or this character is now got a different backstory, or is a completely different core character, but then you're still saying that they're Thor or they're Captain America. Oh, this character is black, he's Captain America, or whatever it is. And I just think, like, for me, that's when they change canon, and that's when it doesn't work, because how can you have, like, if you expect me to suspend disbelief that there's a guy named Tony Stark, right? And so he had this heart thing and he was going to die, so he created this whatever to save his life, and then this suit, and then he had a change of heart because he was a merchant of war, and all these things. So that all those things are unique ingredients that made Tony Stark Iron Man, right? That's creating a character. But then you have Riri that just steps in and then becomes Iron Man. Like, she doesn't have any of those
Steals the suit.
Yeah, they don't have, and even like War Machine, I thought was a little bit of a stretch. Like really, another guy just dons on the armor and then can become an Iron Man. I just think that there has to be like a line that's drawn where if Tony Stark is truly the unique guy and he's Iron Man, then we shouldn't be able to say that anybody can step in and become that guy. I think there are certain caveats, or there's certain exceptions that I have, like with legacy characters, because the way I always thought of Batman and Dick Grayson, Robin, is that Robin would eventually, as a legacy character, take Bruce Wayne's place as Batman, or that Speedy would take Green Arrow's place, or even the Wally West, Barry Allen's place. So they kind of had this legacy kind of father-son, that you're going to take the mantle kind of understanding. And that's kind of like a normal thing. Like, you have a family business, the dad, passes on the business to his children. And then they keep on the tradition of, like, I don't know, furniture building or whatever it is. So I think those ideas. So there are some exceptions, but the stuff that they're doing now, I think, for me, it fundamentally changes canon in a way that it says that anybody can be these characters. Like, you don't even have to be that unique or special anymore.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're trying to make them less special and rewrite it. And there's many good points. Like when we talk about the core thing that you just said, Art, with Iron Man, for instance, he went from being a prisoner of the Viet Cong to being one of some Middle Eastern terrorist group. That doesn't change the core value or the story, really. It just modernizes it. So that's
Yeah,
perfect.
good.
That's not a problem, right? But if we take Miles Morales, for instance, which is a fairly popular character, but we'll just imagine if they did this instead in the Ultimate Run. Imagine Spider-Man's dead, which my son owns that book, by the way. And you have this kid who is, just the biggest Spider-Man fan ever, and he can't believe it. And he cannot believe that a world without Spider-Man cannot exist. And he goes out, and he's a real smart kid, and he creates some kind of suit or something that allows him to be a hero. And he goes on the street and he calls himself something. The invisibility seems to be many things. So say Shadow Spider as an homage to Spider-Man. That would have been a cool story. But no, that's not what they did. They just copied him and basically race swapped Peter.
I actually like the Miles Morales story because it actually addresses that issue where he goes out in the Spider-Man costume and people are like, "What the heck are you doing?" And that's why he gets a new costume. And that's like, no, I'm not him. This, like, I want to pay respect to him, and I'm gonna go through with what he's
Spider-Man. I totally disagree with that. He wouldn't be Spider-Man. Like there's only one RT Bear. It'd be like Todd saying, I'm gonna be RT Bear now. Like you just can't do that. The identity, you can't. There's certain things that you can, like if it's a legacy character or even the Green Lantern Corps, it's built into the idea. There can be many of these guys that have similar powers and abilities. But I think when you have like a character like Spider-Man, I think it gets weird.
Well, here you go, Art.
Go ahead.
You've mentioned the problem. It's the legacy character then, because we have these characters that originally are from 30s, 40s, 50s, some of them 60s, 70s, and now they become popular. And so you keep them going on and on and on. And so they then become icons. You then have them in toy store shelves and on greeting cards. And, Captain America and Spider-Man are such big, Superman are such big icons. Do you have the ability to even age them up or age them out into different stories and eventually get to the point where they either have to pass on or retire or something in a way so that you can open a story up for a new character in a sense? Because I think, like you were saying with the Cirque du Soleil kind of concept, you can redo the same story over and over again. It happens in our Earth constantly because we have thousands of years. We've got the same story being told over and over again, right, Cornelius? And
that's correct.
So you can even have like even a same similar freak accident created a similar character, but give it to somebody else in a new time frame and let old Tony Stark let Tony Stark age up into old Tony Stark, or Bruce Wayne be old Bruce Wayne. What would these characters do now when they're in their 60s and 70s of all this superhero-dom? And it just opens up a whole new depth of character. But can they do that if you have these legacy characters from these big two?
When I was talking about legacy, what I was talking about is like legacy, like a family legacy, like a Batman Robin kind of legacy, not necessarily just a character that's been around for a long time. That's kind of what I was talking about, where there's kind of groomed a replacement character for you. So then that's what I was saying works for me. What you're saying is an interesting idea, but I think these ideas only work in Elseworld scenarios, like in a universe, like a 2099 universe, like what Marvel did or something like that, because they're fun and interesting ideas. But if you're talking about generationally speaking, why would you change or try to recreate Tony Stark? Couldn't you just instead of recreate the core of Tony Stark or his canon, you just basically create a new surface world? You create, it's the same Tony Stark, but he lives now in 2019. You know what I mean?
That's exactly what I'm saying. Yeah, don't recreate him. Let him age up. Let Peter Parker age up.
I don't mean age up. I just mean like you would keep him, because you see these are problems, you guys. This industry's been talking about these things forever. This is my belief. that you can't really age these characters up in regular time. You can't
Right.
do it because it's an impossible task. You talk about like the topic that we're talking about right now, and basically, letting Pandora's box open and all this craziness that can come out of it. If we entertain this idea, Todd DeWolf, my gosh, man, you talk about confusion central. The core would be completely lost, and everything would be up for grabs. And then people would be scratching their heads like, who was the original Tony Stark? Oh, and so now you're 3 generations removed from the original Tony Stark, and then everything becomes the Batman Beyond concept. You know what I mean? There's this old mentor, and then there's this young guy. So every one of these stories isn't unique anymore. Every one of these stories becomes like, Batman Beyond.
Which, to be fair, Batman Beyond did do a really good job of like
but you
keeping
can
the canon and
Marvel
and stuff.
Universe that way. Could you imagine Captain America, mentoring? Could you imagine Tony Stark mentoring somebody, and so on and so on?
The problem here is I think that America and the West has a really big issue tackling the other 2 male trifecta, which is hero, king, mentor, and we kind of get stuck on the hero thing and ignore the whole king issue and the mentor thing, so we never grow past it. And we don't have that, and that's also why we don't have mentors anymore in our regular everyday life too.
Well, it's
because we don't
also
have
why, like, the Looney Tunes never age. Like, that's
Yeah.
why a lot of these concepts, the Disney characters, they never age because they have to stay timeless. They have to stay the same. And we've talked about this on another Pontificators. The idea was always that you age out of comics anyways, and a new generation comes in. But the only reason we can talk about these ideas like DeWolf was talking about, where we could age these characters in a kind of a normal, like every year, kind of almost like, what was that TV show, 48 Hours or whatever it was, or 24 Hours, where you have like basically a story. So you have 24 episodes and each one's an hour episode. So you get to follow everything in real time. So we could do that, but then every one of these characters would become the same character at some point. They would all become mentors, and they would all, all these beats would be the same. So I just think that you really can't do these ideas in any realistic way. And that
can I propose a realistic option?
Yeah, is that you have a new generation come in, and then they get to experience Tony Stark in, like what the generation before them basically got to experience, with maybe just some more contemporary window dressing. But the core, the canon is always the same. So go ahead. I'm sorry, Buster.
Yeah, no. I just I have an idea. I got an idea. My hand's up, by the way. I know you can't see it, but it is up.
Oh, Lordy.
Now, my idea is really, really simple. Marvel, for instance, since we seem to be talking about mainly Marvel, Marvel goes back, and what they do is they create a classic line, and they take all these great characters back to the 60s where they started and put them in the 60s. Then do comics again with this great high-end art we have now, and all this great production value, and tell new stories, but sticking to what the canon that already exists. And then you have the other side of Marvel, which is what's going on right now. And now you can have an older Tony Stark, and some characters won't age. Captain America, Wolverine, they're still around. But you also can introduce a lot of new characters, legacy characters, children, what have you. And in this way, you have the best of both worlds. You still have Iron Man, you still have Spider-Man. It's right there. But now we're seeing, where did history take us? Where are we now, right? And I think that would be a really great way to do things. And I think that would be the first actual true reboot that Marvel's ever done, because they've never done a real one.
Well, would these be separate lines of comic books, or would this just be one, like the main Marvel universe that would do these ideas?
Well, you have the Marvel comic, which is right now, which has a lot of new characters or legacy characters, stuff like that. And then you have the classic title. And the classic title, very simply, is showing all those old characters back where they started, and but doing it for the new generation and this beautiful art with new stories, but still following the stories and the things that happened to them, maybe from different angles or different things they did throughout the year. We didn't see those stories or what have you. So what I'm saying is you have both running at the same time, but one is set in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 40s for Captain America, or even further back for some. And then you have the Marvel now, if I had dare to say such a thing, that has what it looks like 60 years on. Where are we now, right? Like, for instance, Tony Stark's still around, but he's a really old dude. He's like 90 something. He has to wear the armor just to stay alive, something, and he's kind of running the show from this giant corporate chair, right? And he's got all this, Iron Man, cores and all that kind of stuff going on. You could do these really interesting things and introduce new characters and new concepts freely. Right
now, would there be a new Iron Man though? Like if there was Tony Stark, would there be? He's the older guy. Would there be a new new Iron Man?
I think it would be a different character, right?
You wouldn't create a new Iron Man so much as you would expand on what he's doing. Like you wouldn't have Iron Man, but you would have War Machine, as in like the next generation of what he was doing.
Battle Tiger, whatever.
Wow, you guys sound like you're really in favor of like these characters possibly aging out and then having new characters come in. So
thank you.
I'm kind of sensing that like this Riri becoming Iron Man and these things. You guys
no, Riri sucks. She's a villain. No,
let me defend my original idea again a little bit because.
Well, hold on for 1 minute, DeWolf. I'm sorry. Hold that thought. JSA to Justice League. So I'm an older guy. There used to be two continuities. To answer Chester's question, there used to be Earth 1, Earth 2. So JSA Earth, I don't know. I don't remember if it was Earth 2. I think it was Earth 2. There was basically an older Superman, Batman, and so on and so on. And so one of the characters that came out of a union was Huntress. So Huntress is the daughter of Selena Kyle and Bruce Wayne in Earth 2 continuity. And so then they brought all the Earth 2 continuity into Earth 1 with the Crisis stuff. And then we had the Cluster F that turned into. Yeah. So they have tried to do these disconnecting, like they parallel, but they're disconnected at the same time.
They didn't though, Art, because they didn't commit to the bit, dude. They multiversed it. I'm talking about having it right in the same universe. It's simply 60 years removed. Those stories that are going on are part of the history of the stories that are going on now. And you could even think of the writing you could do with that, dude. You could have these things going on. You could have stories in the past and the future happening and see how what the past did ends up becoming a major cornerstone point of the story that's going on. I mean, you could do some great writing things with it too. And you're not aging them out. I mean, you are in one side of the comics, but you're still doing them. They're still there.
Chester wants the X-Men to do that 70s show.
Yeah, but then at some point, then how ridiculous does that become? Then do you eventually have to have these characters die?
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah. So going back to where I was at there,
for everyone,
you wouldn't actually have these characters age up year by year. You would just do it by eras and stages. And now that I say that, they've already done this. Because Iron Man's gone from one set of armor to new armor, more powerful armor, the nano armor, and all the way to just shooting it into his veins. And I said it like that. So they've already been moving forward. Like Peter Parker, he's now ahead of a big company and he's rich. So they already are moving characters up. But what they've done is they've created a box and they've created a wall and a line they will not cross. And when they do that, they actually limit the ability to have good character and good story available because they won't just age them up. They're now sandwiched in here trying to create new stories without having any new character development.
Yeah, why wouldn't I, as Iron Man, the most genius person in the world, be like, yeah, I created this super armor and I'm the only one that's going to fly in it? Why don't I just teach a team of people that are going to fly this? Exactly. Why wouldn't I mentor people doing that to make sure they're good characters?
Which is why the movie did it, Dragon.
Yeah, why would Bruce Wayne have ever become Batman? Why, if he was a billionaire, why wouldn't he just create a bunch of Batman Sentinels that would go around the
But he
city?
did that.
Why? He didn't originally do that, though.
But he grew into it, is what Dragon is saying, right?
No, but he has done it. Like, he's done other things. He went down the path of joining the CIA, at least in one canon. It was like, this doesn't work. So, and then he figured out, and he grew, and then he came upon the idea of going through Batman. And then when he went through, yeah, it's all about growing.
Character development.
Yeah, progression. Yeah.
Yep.
Right now, all comics are based on, like, we can't get past this one stage, and they're trying to push those characters out and make them just disappear rather than growing them out while growing another set beneath them. It's not, we don't want them to, it's not that we want them to just like go away. We want them to grow. And it's not like we don't want new characters. We just want them to come in naturally.
Exactly.
So then as long as the canon is met, so as long as this older Tony Stark is still the same Tony Stark at his core, at his canon is always the same, no matter what age he is. So for each, because I think what are we kind of, I'm just trying to figure out, are we saying that canon should always be met, or that canon can be, like, is it good or bad? I guess what I'm asking.
It has always failed when people have gone down the route of saying that there's too much canon, it's all confusing. Every single time a company has said that, they've relaunched and we're like, we're rebooting. And
you mean like Star Wars?
Like Star Wars. See, I was going to mention that, Duel, because you want to talk about sacrilege. In this new movie that's coming out, we have the clone of the Emperor. You know, Palpatine was a clone. So basically, in just that one statement, that one concept, the understanding of that, they actually take the original trilogy and just flush it. Because everything they did in Return of the Jedi is worthless. It means nothing. They didn't have a success. There was no happy party. They failed. They were all schnookered, right?
Okay.
All of them.
No, actually, it actually goes full circle because of the Clone Wars.
No.
If you clone the Emperor,
No.
it's trying to redo something.
God, no.
What?
No.
Wait,
The Wolf,
there's
no.
actually
I could write that story.
No.
It'd be great.
No.
There's a
You go
counter
right
to
ahead.
that.
I'm
Yeah,
not buying it.
There's a
I read
counter
that
to
story.
all of that.
Star Wars.
You can go. There's a counter to saying that canon is necessary, and that is if you go back to Batman stuff and you go, what about his rogues gallery? The original Mr. Freeze was a horrible idea. The animated series created pretty much a new character, but saved the name, and that character is a really great character. Should that not have happened?
Okay, so we're saying that canon can be changed as long as we like it.
No.
No.
I think what we're saying is progression. You know, people growing and becoming, and changing as time goes by is just fine. But you can't change the concept that the character was created under. For instance, if you take Batman and he's not afraid of bats. Matter of fact, he thinks bats are the scariest thing to other people, and he's going to use that to scare other people because, from his point of view, he has zero fear whatsoever. But the bat is going to get him because that's what makes everybody scared. The bat, right? That is not Batman. Now, he did use the bat to terrify people because it terrified him.
Right.
And if you take that away, it's not Batman anymore. Now, if you go to a point that now Batman is no longer afraid of bats, well, that's fine. He's grown, but he still came from that point. You see.
Okay, how do you feel about then, like Batwoman and Batgirl and all these other characters that have absolutely no origin in that? What Bruce Wayne went through. So they take on the bat, but then are they just copycats?
Well, in a way, but they're a progression of Batman. This is the effect that he has had on the world around him. This is progression. It's a perfect example of progression.
And then as long as their canon, like whatever they were created and motivated by, stays in tune,
Sure.
then everything would be fine. You can have them go off on tangents and stuff as long as their core isn't tampered with or compromised.
That's right.
Okay, so that brings us to a question of, can you
Wait,
have
wait, I
Lois
wanna-
Lane without Superman?
I want to say something really quick. This is none of your business. Like, see, this is where I'm coming from. Harley Quinn at 40. Like, do we want to age these characters up? What do you guys really ask for? Like, do you want to see a 40-year-old Harley Quinn?
No, but like no one wants to see Harley Quinn. But if we're gonna see her, she
Yeah,
might
that's
as
true.
well have a daughter.
That's fair. She could have a daughter. And I think you're kind of
Actually has,
missing the
like,
point with the aging up. I'm not saying just age them up and then be done with it. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that have this classic core thing going on where they were in time, where they came in, and have that going on. They're young, they're fresh. It's happening right now in that classic imprint. And then in the modern one, sure, they're older. But it's showing it's fully within progression, and you have so many more opportunities to do with these characters. I'm not saying get rid of them. I'm not saying that, oh, okay, we stop it, reboot now. Tony's a 90-year-old dude, and there's no Iron Man Tony Stark. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying run them simultaneously and give yourself greater opportunity.
Yeah.
But you're also talking about this as like a company-wide initiative, right? So you're not talking about just like they had like the Punisher and then the Punisher War Journal. So you got to see Punisher in a contemporary setting doing the things, and then you got to see him in the wartime. You got to see the same character. But you're talking about like that idea, but the whole universe would be done that way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I would break it down into classic, Marvel Now, and then Tales, where you can experiment, do whatever you want, Elseworld stuff, and then have your Max label and your Kid label that goes on it. That's what I do. If I was in charge, I'd be on that immediately.
Yeah,
all the young kids would want to read the Max books, so they wouldn't want to read their own.
I agree with you, but I don't think that DC and Marvel are capable of doing that. Well.
Oh no, you're right, because you have to have character development. You have to be able to take a character from being innocent and naive or going through some emotional trauma, and then allowing that character to grow over time into someone new, where you acknowledge the canon in their past actually happened. Like if you tried to do that with Starfire, that's where you would have that character.
Yeah, it's an interesting idea, and you can do interesting things with it. I guess I don't know who would be in charge that would be able to carry this initiative through in any kind of way that would have continuity, that these ideas would stay, like the canon would stay, and that they wouldn't be compromised, and that they could keep this initiative going. Because like how long are you talking about doing this, Chester? Would you be talking about
forever?
Forever?
No, you need someone who's professional, someone that can manage something, and someone who actually takes time to put in a continuity group to make sure things are being done that way. And I don't know, hard work? Oh, shocking.
Yeah,
I'm telling you right now, the way these companies are run, I don't think anybody would have that kind of foresight and dedication to see this thing through. As soon as they got a couple bad letters or the sales started, they would shift and alter excuse me, the plan.
Yeah, well, that's a different conversation than from what we're having.
Sure is.
You guys are talking about Harley.
It's become increasingly more important to protect the IP more than ever.
You guys are talking about Harley Quinn as like it's a bad idea to age her up, but I think she would be one of the best characters to age up. At least her original character, her New 52 character would be garbage to age up, but her original character would be great.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I don't agree with any of this. I'm just going to come right out and say, I don't think you should age up any of these characters, because as soon as you do, they're not cool anymore. You don't want to see a 40-year-old, Harley Quinn. You don't want to see a 70-year-old Tony Stark. I don't think anybody really wants to see that.
Now, it's interesting that you say that. I think it's actually very telling, because we've seen them do everything they can to fight against this and not do anything we're talking about here. And of course, we're just having a pontification, right?
Oh, yeah.
But it's interesting coming from you, because you are an insider. You are a dude from DC, right? So it's interesting to see how you're thinking, because it's how they all think. It is a culture.
It's not wrong.
Within. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm saying it's
It is
interesting
wrong
for
because
me,
we want to see it.
because it's giving me insight.
You're acting like
just what I'm trying to say is that. Oh, go ahead.
you're acting like this hasn't happened for you, but it has.
Exactly.
You've gotten these type of stories. It's just not in the, like, they're kind of out of canon. You've gotten what you wanted, and if you wanted to see more of that, like if you wanted to see more of Gotham by Gaslight, well, they've actually gone back to it 2 or 3
Dude,
times.
that's not at all what I'm talking about. Did you not listen to a word I said?
Yeah, but if you want an older, more mature Batman, it's not like it hasn't been done.
Yeah, but it's taken out of the reality, dude. It's just Elseworld. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in the continuity, dude. In continuity.
But then you're not protecting the IP, and it is very important to do that these days. The IP is a Batman young enough where he's not married. He's a philanthropist.
He is the Batman for every generation, because if you age him up, he's not the Batman for every generation. You're creating a new Batman for every generation, but it's not the Batman for every generation. Does that make sense?
Oh no, I understand. It's a very interesting conversation.
I think we're
troubling.
This is good.
And it's a problem, and that's why we're having this pontification, because it is a problem of this idea. Can you keep them in the past and leave them where they at, which I think makes them stagnant, or can you actually move them forward and do different things with them? Because as you move them forward, you do bring in new people. And why is it important to bring new people? Because of the new generation of readers. If they had their own version of Batman to latch on to, who's now being mentored by the old Batman, then the old readers, we would love to see, as we grow old, he grows old, and now you got a new guy taking on the mantle, and the young kids could latch right on to what's going on there.
You've already had that. You've had Batman and Robin. You had Wally West. You had Aqualad. You've had these characters before. The problem is that this has always been the conceit in the industry, that you age out of comics. You have 5 to 8 years, and then you move on. Okay, so then that's always been at the backbone and the heart of the industry. So we were always creating characters for that new generation that was coming in. So they didn't have to. They were coming in fresh. So by coming in fresh and making these stories more one and done without a serious load of continuity and things for people to have to go back and understand and all these things, but you're doing more one and dones, and you're doing things more where you can attract new readers, constantly young readers. They don't have all this continuity. They don't have this canon. They have no preconceived notions of anything. They just know that they're getting a Batman comic, right? And then they read that comic for 5 to 8 years, and then the publisher has to realize kind of where some of these age groups, where they're coming at. So generationally speaking, let's just say every 10 years, they realize that they're going to have a turnaround of new ideas and new readers. So then they don't change. Once again, we don't change the canon of what the characters are. All we do is change the superficial. We change the world that they live in, but we don't change the character. So everything seems contemporary just by the surroundings. Things seem to be modern just by the situations that they're put in. Like if you read a comic from 1960, they didn't have cell phones. So now just based on contemporary comic books, you're writing new ideas and new experiences just by addressing the technology of the time. So these comics
you don't change the canon.
Generationally changing.
Do you know what
but you said you
is?
don't change the canon.
Right. Yeah.
Well, every book you add to the canon. Canon's always added to. So
that's
don't
the point. We're saying that's a good thing. Yeah, progression is a good thing. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Do you guys know about Boruto? Boruto?
Are you talking about the thing that goes after Naruto?
You talk about
Yeah.
Naruto's son?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, he is. Yeah.
That kind of like breaks the entire idea that we don't want to see adult versions of these characters or further aged along characters.
Yeah, but Boruto is very successful here in Japan. It's more popular than Naruto was. Yeah.
Well, there
so
are
perfectly.
there are characters that already have this mythology built in, or these ideas. Somebody in the chat brought up the Phantom. The Phantom was a legacy character from the get-go. So the reason he's the ghost that walks is because he never dies. Generationally speaking, there's always a Phantom. And because he wears a mask and stuff, nobody really knows who he is. So anybody could be the Phantom. And usually it's a family member that will take on the legacy or the mantle of the Phantom. So all the natives and the people that know him are raised with this idea. And then they actually go, wait a minute, the Phantom was around in my grandfather's day. He's still doing this. So then the only thing that they can think of is that he's a ghost who walks, that he's not a human being. So then the legacy comes out of that. I always thought the Phantom was one of the best ideas as far as being able to grow and change organically, like all the stuff that we're talking about right now. It's built into the idea.
So that's where Mitch Weiser got the idea. Oh, okay.
There's also Dragon Ball, who also aged up their characters, and it's one of the most popular series ever.
Yep, exactly.
All right, real quick, I'm going to head off. I 100% agree with growth as far as, as long as the canon keeps the core values. And
you like Answer
kind of grows. And I 100% agree with that. I like generational things. Agree with that as well. And I think that's my point of view. I got to head off.
All right,
cool.
man.
I think, thanks a lot, Zach. I think, Zach, it would have been a lot easier if you just said, I agree with Chester, and it would have been over.
Yeah.
Well, Chester, remember, I'm still in your shadow, so
That's true.
Yeah.
It's scary. It's terrifying.
All right, later, guys.
Later, dude.
There's Zorro. Zorro does the same thing.
And now we got Lady Zorro.
I think they later brought that in, but I'm not sure. Was the original Zorro the same?
No.
As far as I know, that Zorro was originally like a legacy character, and they kept on bringing him back.
No, he wasn't. But that addition of taking the old Zorro and bringing in as i.e. the movies, that was a progression, though. It wasn't a changing of canon.
Right. Yeah.
Oh yeah, because they even changed the technology. They upped the era to closer to the Civil War. They did all those things, and then made him the passed on from the original Zorro. So all the original Zorros then still were the same in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't like when this is just a pet peeve, and I don't know if it's canon or values or what it is, but I think the biggest pet peeve is when they turn one character into another character. When they use these ideas like, oh, all of a sudden Zorro is the Phantom. No, the Phantom is the Phantom. There is no legacy Zorro. You know what I mean? Like that's. I think as soon as you start doing that, then I don't know if it's, like I said, canon or legacy or values or whatever, but I think that these characters change fundamentally for me, that they're not the same characters anymore. The DNA, I guess that's my terminology. The DNA is different. So Batman and then Robin, that's kind of built into the DNA. It's always been there. Robin, to me, if he becomes Batman, it's a natural progression. We've already seen him go from Robin to Nightwing. Stuff like that. I think works because it feels like it's built into the DNA. Stuff
I don't like that interpretation
with Iron Man. I don't know. I think that gets weird. Or what is it? Jane Foster as Thor. Like Thor is Thor. His name. It's weird.
It is weird. Well, and that's, of course, obviously weird. Thor is Thor. What are you doing, right? And that was just, and of course, these are attacks, right? But let me give a more subtle and better example.
Okay.
Take a look at Hawkeye, right? Now, you got the Hawkeye character. He's always been Hawkeye. But he's important. He's kind of fundamental when it comes to Marvel comic books. But then they brought in this new Hawkeye, Lady Hawkeye, right? And Now instead of injuring him or killing him or something like that, therefore creating a gap for someone to come into the place. Of course, it would have been best if they just injured him and he to the point where he couldn't be Hawkeye anymore, and he had to train the new Hawkeye. That would have been a much better story. So instead of doing the logical thing, what do? They take her, they put her in, and they use the existing character to make them look foolish or silly or somehow bring them down to raise up the character. Now, in this case, it's very much taking a feminist angle, but it could be, and it doesn't have to be feminism. It could be anything, right? But taking and diminishing the old character to make a new character seems to be the avant-garde thing of the day, and it's infuriating because they're doing it everywhere. They did it with Star Wars too. We were talking about that earlier. They did the same thing. And that's what they did with this new Lady Hawkeye. And of course, it failed miserably because no one wants that. We don't want to see Hawkeye being treated like a fool and an idiot and being outstepped at every angle. No. And it doesn't make her interesting anyway because she's perfect. She's a freaking Mary Sue.
Right. And like you said with Star Wars, is like the new trilogy is just crapping on the original trilogy because Luke Skywalker was the hero. It was him and it was Anakin's story. They ended it. They put the Emperor down. They stopped it. End of story. That's it. There's nothing else. So then when you go, oh, he was cloned or whatever, then it diminishes Luke and Anakin Skywalker's legacy. It screws up the core DNA because they're saying that wasn't the ultimate battle of good versus evil. This new one is. So it craps on the point of I guess the core values or the canon or DNA of the original legacy or the.
But it also craps on the new one.
The same thing in Endgame too.
Because the clone is you're always going to inherently view a clone as weaker. So when Rey goes up against that clone, she's defeating a weaker variation of that. So that makes her weaker rather than stronger. So there's no progressing in that way either. So you're actually crapping on both sides, even you're trying to make the one side better.
Right. It's a lose-lose scenario. And then Victor brings in Hank Pym, and I'm not sure what you mean by Hank Pym, but I'm gonna add to it. Is like Hank Pym was many different characters. He was Ant-Man, he was Giant Man, he was the Wasp. But one thing about Hank Pym, the reason I thought that worked is because, as we were saying, the values and the core was always there. So when he became all these different characters, he was already kind of a nutcase to begin with. You know what I mean? So when these things happened, it seemed to work. And also he was a scientist. So he was just creating new, experiments. And then he was the guinea pig, so I think that Hank Pym actually at its core value or canon or whatever we're calling this, it always works. So I guess there are some exceptions where these ideas can work.
Yeah, but at the same time, with Hank Pym, they came in and they messed with his canon hardcore in one run, right? Because they basically took the character we know, right? Hank Pym, the genius scientist, and his wife, the Wasp, right? And instead, they changed it to no, he's a wife abuser, where he's pimp slapping her all over the place, right? Just so Captain America could come and put him down and show him what a real man's like. That is messing with canon in a hardcore way.
But that was the Ultimates, right? That was
I'm just saying. I get it's elsewhere, and that's fine. I'm just saying, but that is an example of hardcore messing with the core of a character, dude.
Oh yeah.
Ways you want it one way, and then when they do it that way, it's like, oh, it's too extreme. Is basically what you're acting like.
What are you talking about, dude?
I mean, you're acting like it was almost too much. Like they messed with it too much. No?
I'm saying don't mess with it. I'm against messing with it. I'm saying you can progress it, but don't change a smart, intelligent scientist into a wife beater. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. How about that?
But weren't I'm going to back up for a minute. Wasn't the early Hank Pym, didn't him and the Wasp have an abusive relationship early on in the actual canon? I don't know if they ever had him beat her, but they did say that they they had like problems.
He was a jerk. Yeah.
Yeah. So this is just an extension. So are those values just exaggerated in the Ultimates version, or are are they exaggerated of the core value, or is it's straying completely from the core value?
Well, no, I'll back off that then, because I didn't know that their relationship was strained in the beginning. I never saw that aspect of them. So therefore, if that's true, then I'm wrong.
Okay.
Yeah, I believe the Blitz
That was
slap
sad, by the
coming
way.
from like 60s and 70s.
Yeah, it was. It was horrible.
I
Well,
felt like I needed to
and-
pause and like give you a moment.
Yeah, let's look at the canon of Star Wars, because we have done that before. Look at the actual canon and possibilities thereof. See, because we had a canon established with the original trilogy, and then they went ahead and made 1, 2, and 3. It stuck with canon. There was one thing that stood out as not being canon, and that was like it was never heard of from again, and we were all happy for that. But what was also added was this Darth Plagueis idea. And so when that happened, to bring Darth Plagueis in, not like as a not this other clone thing, right? But if he came up and Luke, sticking with canon, had to put down the Darth Plagueis that we found from the first movies, you would, or from the prequels, that would have taken canon, built on it, and then resolved canon, instead of taking something entirely new and different, which is what now the last 3 have been, which of course has been a flop. That's why canon is important.
Or what you do with that is you actually do what people wouldn't like, and you have Luke go against Plagueis and fail. That's part of the how you tell an epic saga is you have the hero grow and he's able to establish himself, and then at some point he fails, and that prompts a new hero to rise up and become greater. And that's how you would get to Rey.
Possible. It would of course sticking with canon, it would of course have to end with the balance of the Force. And that's
Which brings you back to core, right?
The Force,
Right,
and then what are they calling it? Skywalker now, or something like that. There's all kinds of craziness.
I know, it's so silly, dude. Can you do me a favor, Art, and can you highlight Rhaegar's last comment?
The universe, the ultimate.
Yeah, this one. Yeah. Now, I think it's a good point. He's saying that we're the ultimates of Marvel heresy. Well, here's the thing. It's an Elseworld story, and that's fine. You can do. You're labeling it as Elseworld. It's something different, and that's fine. You're doing something different. You're separating it from the core, right? But here's where it becomes heresy. Then they take their most popular character from this Elseworld story, Miles Morales, and then just paste him onto the actual universe.
Exactly. Yes, they did that with Barbara Gordon as well. I mean, I'm talking about like the Barbara Gordon from Killing Joke, and then all of a sudden they're saying like the Killing Joke happened in canon, so now Barbara Gordon is crippled and she's in a wheelchair. Like that stuff gets weird for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. So, you guys want to wrap this up? We want to put a bow on this, or what do you guys want to do?
As long as there's no Batgirl special #1, that book should never exist.
Oh my God. Yeah.
It's a horrible book.
Now, what did you think about we should wrap it up. You're right, Art. It's been quite a while. But I do have a kind of question for the panel here. Talking about progression, right? And growing the canon. One of the cool little side stories I saw, and of course it was in Elseworld, but Peter Parker was much older, married to Mary Jane, and he had lost a leg fighting, I forget who he was fighting, but he lost a leg and he was basically retired. But their daughter, Mayday, right? Became the new Spider-Girl, right? And I thought that was a great legacy character. I thought that was really cool. And it's not Peter at all. He's still in the story, in the background. He's dad. But here we have a new Spider-Man. It's a Spider-Girl, but it's a legitimate, organic story that brings us this new Spider character. Did you guys enjoy that storyline or not?
I like the idea of it, but I also read the this really cute one where it was Peter Parker, Mary Jane went off to work and he was taken care of. I think it was May Day at that time, and like they go on this adventure, go out to eat and everything. She gets left with Sandman, and he has to go do something. He comes back, he defeats Sandman, picks her up, and goes home. And Mary Jane comes back and it's like, "So how was your day?" He's like, "Nothing. We just watched this movie." It was a really cute little comic, and I would love that comic to be like continuous.
Yeah, I don't know. This is an interesting conversation because I just the way my personality is, I want to have some kind of finite answer. But what I'm really sensing is, there were 6 of us in here, and we all kind of overlap a little bit with what we like and what we agree with. But there's things that we completely disagree with as well. So I think, if anything, I'm taking out of this, I realize how complex these ideas are. And I'm actually starting to empathize a little bit with Marvel and DC, because this is quite I guess a crossroads. Do they try to, move these characters forward in a logical, aged way, or do they try to keep these characters pretty much immortal, and then each generation comes in, gets to enjoy exactly pretty much the same version as the generation before, with the exception of the window dressing being more contemporary? So how do you guys feel about this?
I think it's the same way that I think it's more a question of whether you want to keep Western comics alive or not, because I view it as a Western comics problem, not a comics problem in general. Because manga handles this, but they do it. They tell complete stories, whereas Western comics are you have to have the status quo, and if you don't have the status quo, you're not really. It doesn't work for Western comics because there is so much focus on building the IP rather than having a good long-running story.
But you're also talking about not just see, this is also one thing that we didn't talk about, but I'm just going to throw this in the mix so we can all kind of have our say. But that these characters are ongoing. You know what I mean? Like it's not like a one and done story or a series of like 6 issues like The Watchmen that's self-contained. These things are ongoing for generations, for tens of, like 70 years, 80 years, whatever. So this is quite an undertaking to try to mandate something in like an overview, like, oh, we're going to age up the characters, or we're going to do X, Y, Z. For how long? You know what I mean? And will it be a success?
That's why I like
20 years,
Spider-Man.
is it going to seem silly if you have a 70-year-old Tony Stark? Or in 20 years or 30 years, should you kill that character? This is like a whole different conversation.
And that's why I like Ultimate Marvel and not Marvel.
What's that?
That's why I like Ultimate Marvel and not Marvel. Because Ultimate Marvel always progressed their character. Even if it was nonsense, it was always a progression in the universe. Every story was ongoing and progressed.
Yeah, that is true.
Whereas Marvel just seems like a complete circle over and over and over again, and it goes nowhere.
And Art, you're the one that said that part of this issue was keeping it relevant to the new group of readers, the new generation of readers that you only had for 5 to 8 years. If you actually moved your characters forward, you made them relevant to your growing audience. And so, yes, you have to bring in new characters, but you're creating a new canon for new characters. You're letting the other ones grow. And it's exactly what we've been talking about this whole time. And I think we all understand and agree that canon is vitally important. And when you have this particular medium, you hit that problem, and you eventually have to make that decision. Do you have something that is an ongoing series that just kind of rolls around over and over again like a soap opera or some sort of a sitcom thing versus actual real drama and character development? And do you have a CEO, someone in charge, who is going to say, I'm going to pull the trigger on this. I'm sorry for the violent concept there. We're going to pull the trigger and we're going to do something new. We're going to take a new stance and a new way of doing things, and allow comics to do this versus what we've been doing before.
Well, I guess the topic of the discussion that I've had a problem with from the very get-go is like, well, what is canon? Like does canon change? Can it change? And then what then becomes canon? Because if we're talking about like all these characters that have adopted these new ideas over generations and then they become canon, then we're saying that changing canon or adding to the canon is good, as long as we like it, right?
I think we all are saying, and we all agree, that don't mess with the core of the character. I think that's what we agree upon.
Okay, so that's the values, right? So the values are the core, and then the canon is like we can disagree with the canon or not.
Yeah.
Like there could be changes that happen that we go, this was a misstep. We agree with this, but we don't agree with this other thing.
Generally, when you hit on the right thing, people stop going, we should change that. Like just take Batman. You get him going from the 30s to the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 1000. But you notice that the question is not should we change it from the 30s or whatever. It's you have this idea of Batman. He's stuck in the 80s. You would never say change that Batman once you found that the way that Gotham should look. Gotham is like a mixture of like the 80s and late 90s mixed with a little bit of the like 60s and 70s. No, maybe earlier than that because of that mafia aspect. You have that
I say the Art Deco of the 20s.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
you have
and
creation there.
And what Dragon just said, they do change these characters. These characters have progressed. I said it earlier. They have made changes to these characters as far as where they're at, and the stories that they're doing are now relevant to this particular society. So they're changing that portion, but then that character they're still trying to keep it as they were when they originally came around, and instead of letting them age up. And so now you're stuck with this weird conundrum of a character type, and how is Peter Parker still the college age student kind of concept of a normal little nerdy kid who has cool powers, but now he's in an adult world.
It only becomes a problem if you never age out. Like if you keep reading the comic books beyond the expiration date of your age, those become a problem. Like these are problems not for general audience. These are problems for people that read these books and never stop reading the books. And I think that's kind of the conundrum. If I could just kind of even try to put more focus on what we're talking about. Like the difference between what I was talking about, the old way and then the new way. The old way was they were not thinking about people that were reading comic books for 20 and 30 years. They were thinking about people that were just going to read comic books for 5 to 8. So that there's a very different kind of set of rules that apply in contemporary comic books that didn't apply before. And so I believe like your expectations, DeWolf or Todd's or Chester's or Durakin's are different than what a 7-year-old's would be or an 8-year-old's would be. You know what I mean? Because you're asking like, oh, well, this is getting ridiculous. This is the same Bruce Wayne that I read 10 years ago. You start asking yourself that because you remember those stories and they're in your memory. And every time you read a contemporary book, one that's on the newsstand now, you always have all that knowledge in the back of your head. But if you're a kid buying the book for the first time, they don't have that. So
part of the problem,
what we're talking about is kind of two different mindsets. We're talking about like trying to get, like younger people in. And then for me, that's always the important thing, is to get young people in. So I would be more in favor of not aging up and not changing a lot of these things. Keep them in a contemporary world, but Batman's always Batman. I always said, like, the reason Superman, I remember I used to have these Superman summits and we talked about what's wrong with Superman, what's wrong with Superman. And then Zack Snyder just took it to the nth degree. But what always came out in these conversations is they were saying Superman's not cool. because he's not edgy, because he's not contemporary, he's not these things. And I always said Superman should always be that guy. Superman, not that cool guy, not that edgy guy. He should always be that core farm boy that grew up, in wherever the hell it was. I want to say Ohio, but it wasn't Ohio, in Smallville. So he's always that guy. I said
Kansas.
the way the character becomes cool and the way the character becomes contemporary is he deals with contemporary problems. He's at his core, his value, his canon, his DNA. He's always the same guy. He's just dealing with contemporary things, a contemporary world. So generationally speaking, he never changes. His world does. So if the world can change, then it's always going to seem like a contemporary comic to whoever picks it up. So that's kind of how I feel. But if somebody's reading the book for 30 years, you know what I mean? They're still going to have all these same questions that we've been talking about.
So
why is he?
So one of the problems then that you said was the fact that the books are successful in the first place, and they do keep resonating forward to a new generation, and that creates the problem in and of itself, their success.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of things here in the chat I'd like to respond to, and I think this whole conversation comes down to storyteller versus corporatist is really what we're kind of looking at, I think. And to kind of deal with the thing that Dragon said, and it's going on here about Japanese comics, we have one here that says Berserk will never end. Berserk has been going on for decades. Well, actually, from the Japanese point of view, they kind of see what we do is kind of silly. I don't know, this doesn't have anything to do with our conversation, but I just want to clarify it. Because you say Berserk's been going on for decades. Well, sure. But the way they look at it is, well, how can you have a new artist and a new writer doing someone else's character? Because, yeah, Berserk has been going on for a long time, but it's been done by the same person the whole time, right? Every story, every character in Japan is written by a person. When that person either stops or dies, it ends, right? So they don't understand the concept of other people doing it. Now that's neither here nor there, I guess. But just to kind of explain how the Japanese think about their comic books compared to what we do, they would never do what we do. There would be no Batman.
Let me just throw this out there to add to it. There's another problem that enters into this equation, is that as soon as Marvel was created with a universe that was they all reacted to each other. They lived in the same world. They all kind of lived in New York City and all that. So that universe was kind of coherent from the get-go. DC's wasn't. So what happens sometimes is you can have a universe that you can do certain things within, but then when that universe connects to another universe, it doesn't work. Meaning you can have, if you had a story like The Phantom, right? The Ghost Who Walks. It's a legacy, but you can't really put that kind of character into the DC universe because you can't move the story forward, because you can have the past exist and then you have the contemporary Phantom, but you can't really move that forward and have him age out, because then it poses the question of, why didn't Batman age out? Or why don't these other characters age out? So every one of these decisions, since it's a shared continuity, they all affect each other's universe. I've always said Captain Marvel or Shazam in the DC universe should not be there, because the cool aspects of Billy Batson and all that Wiz comic stuff was it was a self-contained universe, and it worked so well. The sensibilities and everything worked in that universe. Well, those sensibilities have to become the DC universe sensibilities as soon as you put them into that world. You know what I mean? You can't write it as a silly, fun comic or whatever, because it doesn't quite fit into the cynical DC universe. So then you find yourself having to change the character to fit that universe. And I think that becomes a problem as well. So you can age up a character, and you can do a lot of those things that we're talking about if it's a self-contained universe, right? If there's just that one core character and it's part of the mythology, it's part of what it's about. You can age a character, and I think that's a very cool idea. But how do you make that work when it actually affects an entire universe outside of its own universe? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
No.
it's
Oh, yeah.
very difficult to do.
Yeah.
It's a
You-
very
yeah.
complex. I had no idea how complex this idea was
Well-
until we started talking about it. So, like I said, I do start feeling for Marvel and DC a little bit, because I don't think it's as easy of a fix as we like to armchair kind of, think it is, because every one of these ideas kind of affects the other, the universe as a whole.
Yeah,
And that's
there's
why I
also,
said you needed. Go ahead, Dragon.
there's also ideas with perspective, where you and I have different perspectives on the whole Robin Batman character, and they've addressed this sort of in the comics when Dick Grayson came and was like, "No, Tim, you're not Robin anymore, because this character is supposed to be a squire, and you don't need to be a squire anymore."
Right.
It's like,
Yeah,
no,
that-
that's not what Robin is supposed to be. And from my point of view, and from Tim Drake's point of view, it's like, no, I'm Robin. I was the partner to Batman. It has nothing to do with being a squire.
Yeah, and that's why I said that this has to come from the top. You have to have someone up the top saying, "Okay, guys, this is what we're going to do." Right? President of the company says, "We're going to now move forward in a different direction. That this is going to be a new era moving forward. We're going to age everybody up." So all the writers across all the books, now you have to put on your thinking caps. You have to come up with new stories. We got to get new writers in here, and these guys are going to have to work hard. You're going to have to brainstorm, and you're actually going to have to even come together in groups and meetings and discuss what you're doing and how it affects all the rest of them, which we've done this before. We've had all these intercrossed things like Infinity War. It's happened before, where you mixed stories between titles while the titles were able to do their own thing. And you would have, if you did that now as a DC or a Marvel, you would come up with the new way of doing something and the new story that would be talked about then for another 10 years down the road.
Imagine how exciting that would be, dude. Right?
Yeah.
It would be exciting. I'm sorry, Draken. Go ahead.
I said they'd have to rehire lore masters since they fired all of them.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, it kind of brings me back. Let me kind of cover the thing of aging up from art and finish the point on the Japanese comics. Here's the thing, though. They don't their characters do age as stories go on, and of course, like I said, when the person who creates it dies, it's done, or they decide to move on. That's the way it works here. And the effect it has, it doesn't have this kind of thing where we have literally 90 years or whatever it is of Batman, 80 years of Batman. But what it does do is keep the industry incredibly fresh, because there always has to be new ideas. They're constantly competing against each other to see what's going to catch people's attention. And therefore, you have way many stories, way many characters that you have in the West. And this comic book industry and culture here in Japan is incredibly vibrant. I would say it may well be more vibrant than it has ever been in America, where comic books were created. And
thought of a great topic.
It's a free market, right? It's the free market idea that keeps pushing it forward.
Well, I think you could do the same thing if you had a corporate mandate and give people, and we talked about this in the Pontificators as well, you gave creatives ownership, and you encourage them to come up with villains and actually brand new ideas and more contemporary ideas, because I think you can keep a character at its core, at its canon, at its values, its core values, and you can make that interesting, how it affects, how that character works within a contemporary setting, how a character works with a contemporary villain, a villain that doesn't adhere to that canon or those values, and that's definitely opposed to it in every way, and then make those characters as cool, as contemporary as they possibly can. Then that character, like say Batman, never changes, but that world and that universe is. And I'm not even saying that you fundamentally change even his rogues gallery. You just add to the rogues gallery. You can make these books interesting without major changes. If you just said, we're going to make this book as contemporary as possible, so we're going to pull in every possible angle that's happening right now to make it relevant to a contemporary market, to young kids that are coming up right now, their issues, their, I know that they're trying to do that stuff with some of the SJW stuff, but I think that's where we're getting into problem with values, core values, and canon. So, but that aside, do that, but then encourage them to write new villains and new situations that haven't really been done before. Challenge these characters in ways that you haven't challenged them before. And you can do them by putting them into a more contemporary setting with more contemporary problems.
Oh, but Art, could you imagine what you're saying though? If you take the contemporary society of what's going on today, you put it in Captain America, and you have Captain America defending the America and the Constitution as he knows it, he becomes the villain of his own book just by fighting the SJWs themselves.
Yeah, that would be awesome story.
Right.
Crazy. It may be awesome, but how would it be received?
I have a story like that. It's an old Captain America story I wrote years ago. Nothing ever happened with it, but it's kind of the same idea that you have these guys and their core. Because the thing is, if we can all sign off on saying that the core of all these heroes is good, like their value system, they stand for something. They all these characters stand for something uniquely different. They kind of overlap in some areas, but they all kind of have their unique point of view as how to dispense justice and what they think is morally right and wrong. So then you have that. You never mess with that, but then you create the world that is in opposition to potentially those ideas, or the sky is the limit. Because the thing is, I thought this was genius. I'm just going to bring up the Nolan thing, and I know it's film and it's Batman, and Jirakin probably has a problem with it, but what they did with that Joker character, and people don't really talk about it, but I saw it, and I saw it immediately. That character is motivated by one thing. That is not a complicated character. That is not a complex character. That is nothing. That is a character that all he wants is anarchy. That's it. In the purest of forms. So you cannot, Alfred says it all. It's like a mission statement. You can't rationalize. You can't reason with him. He's not motivated by anything that you can even relate to. So then how do you battle a guy like that? How do you fight somebody like that? That's not even a physical battle. That's a battle of ideology, of beliefs.
That's right.
And how do he's laughing when Batman's beating the crap out of him in the holding cell. He's laughing at him because he sees the irony. All your strength, all your weapons, everything you stand for. You can't stop me. You can't stop this. You know what I mean? Because I don't give a crap about any of those things that you care about. I don't. So you can't reason with me, and you can't rationalize any of this. And
it's beautiful.
Yeah, I thought it was so beautiful, and because they're like, oh, the Joker's insane. The joke, like all these different ideas that they've played with and made him very complicated. I thought by distilling him down to that one core belief, he becomes the ultimate villain to Batman. Like, how do you even deal with a character like that? I thought they dealt with it beautifully, because then they brought in morality, and they brought in that there are more people that actually are good in the world than are bad. And that even though the Joker played this card and thought humanity would collapse and go the easy route and side with him, they did not. So in a sense, that Batman broke him, his ideology, his belief system. He didn't beat him physically because he couldn't. Because he didn't care. The Joker didn't care. You could beat the crap out of him all day long, and it wouldn't matter to him. So I think you make this a very contemporary character, and you can deal with these situations in a way that I think are more interesting without actually fundamentally changing too much. It's just a matter of having Batman face a new set of problems. That's all. Just create characters and put them in situations that you haven't before. You know, and I know that's
a good point.
easier said than done, but
yeah. Well, you know, the thing I think is interesting because we're, you know, the Joker, that scene particularly was one of the greatest in movie history, I think. That was a great scene. But one of the issues we have, we kind of touched on it. It's not really dealing with the main subject, but we touched on the fact that, you know, why aren't they talking about current affairs these days? Because they're just avoiding it, right? And if you remember when 9/11 happened, you remember that cover where Captain America was standing in the rubble? You remember that?
yeah.
Amazing.
What a great cover. What an amazing moment, right? And I think they're missing a huge opportunity right here. Why don't you have Captain America fighting against, you know, potentialist Antifa terrorists? Because they are terrorists. And then you could also have someone doing some brilliant writing where they're trying to show, well, no, this, what you're calling a terrorist is actually right. And you could have some counter opposing ideas coming from different books, and you could have really dynamic, dramatic storytelling going on right now. And they're missing that opportunity completely because they've either decided to take one political side or to simply ignore it altogether.
Well, I think they
Yeah,
don't.
you
Yeah, they don't want to get political at all, so they don't do it. Even in the films, they kind of had Hydra related or, you know, connected to the Nazis, but not
Sure.
really. Yeah.
Sure. I mean, you could do it in the same way, just like Stan did. You don't have, it doesn't have to be that direct on the nose. You can put it aside to this organization or that. Of course, you should do it that way. Just like Garth Ennis or Alan Moore or, you know, Frank Miller. All those guys are very they're very socialist people. They're very liberal. They're very anti-superhero, actually. But they went out and they told a very interesting and dynamic story that we all enjoy, even though we might not agree with the politics of the person.
Right.
We enjoyed the story because it was well presented and done in an interesting way. And it wasn't on the nose. It was aside.
Yeah, exactly. You can make parallels to it so people know, or some people might understand what you're referencing, but you're not actually saying it. So
Yeah.
you're kind of delving into these contemporary situations or problems without actually saying it's Antifa or it's whoever. You know, and actually humor comedy has done this forever, and old comic books have too. Like, these are still villains, you know, these are still villain archetypes. So if you don't want to get politically, you know, or finger point like this is this group and Captain America's fighting them, then you create something that's similar and then have them, you know, fight those guys. Because I mean, good is good and bad is bad, you know, and that's what these things are. They're black and white moral tales, or at the very essence, they should be somewhat that.
Comics were
So,
always fun
Why don't
when they
we
were
just-
leading the social dynamic, right? Because the X-Men in the 90s, they were pushing forward on the idea, borrowing from something else, Star Trek, right? Having the two kiss, that was leaning forward. So what you have to do now is find out where we're at, but don't write about that. Write about what we need to be looking forward towards, and then that would also give your characters more contemporary value.
Yeah. So, God, it's a great conversation.
It is.
We're going on 2 hours now, and it feels just as fresh as when we started. So I thank everybody in the chat, because the chat's actually chiming in. I think this may be our best pontificators yet. So thank you, Durakin, for coming up with this. And I think it took me a while, you guys, and I apologize with canon and core values and all these type of these ideas, because I wasn't real clear on what like a value and the canon is. So I think I have a better idea of that. So I apologize if I was a little bit confrontative at the beginning, because I didn't.
Oh, that's okay. You're just old.
I am old.
Yeah.
But I think that like canon, what canon was, it was throwing me, because I always think of canon as like, if you wrote a Bible for the character, right? So like, this is your bit for Batman, and all these things are in that Bible. That's canon, right? But then what we're also saying is that the canon can be added to. But who decides and what does linger, what does become part of that DNA of that canon and what doesn't. Because every time you fundamentally change a story or these ideas, you're changing canon, right?
What if all we did in the Western comics is we just wrote one shots, used the same characters, but well, for the heroes we used the same hero, we did different villains, and they were all just one shots, and none of them were connected.
Ugh,
You know what? I'll tell you
Would
right
that work?
Unsustainable.
no.
It used to exist that way. It's not unsustainable as long as you can bring new people in, because one and dones used to exist before. Because
true.
if you do one and dones, then you're saying your level of commitment isn't for the next 10 years. You're saying you can enjoy one book, and if that's all you ever bought, then you had a great reader experience. But if you bought the next one, then you get another Batman adventure or Spider-Man or whoever it is. And then they usually would do some kind of crossover event, maybe at the end of the year or something like that. And they used to have annuals. I used to look forward to annuals because you would have your 12 issues, right, of whatever the run is, and then you would have an annual, and the annual would usually either bring that storyline to a head or give you one big epic tale that would cross over into maybe something else, or give you a glimpse into that, Spider-Man is in the same universe as the Fantastic Four or whatever it is. So
The
go ahead.
reason why that wouldn't work is because you don't have Zorro or Lone Ranger today in a contemporary comic.
Yeah, that's true. And
It would not
I
work.
think that's a touch. DeWolf, you're touching on a topic we haven't even covered at all. That is the progression of trends themselves, because
Ooh.
that affects
Oof.
things for damn sure, right?
Yeah.
Here's the funny thing about that entire topic is that the people who pushed for there to be actual canon is the fans, because the publishers would have just kept on doing one and dones, but the fans kept on going, no,
Yep.
this is connected, this is connected, this is connected, and eventually that led into Crisis on Infinite Earth, where everything became connected.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I think that at the time I kind of applauded that, because I was like, Earth 1, Earth 2, all these different Earths, let's combine them in one, because it's kind of confusing. But I look back and I think the Shazam universe should have stayed in the Shazam universe. I think some of these characters should exist in their own universe. And then you could actually do what Chester was saying. If there's an Earth 1, Earth 2, you can actually make an Earth 2 comic. You can actually make an Earth 1 comic, and you can have this universe that runs parallel to the other, but it's an aged out Bruce Wayne, or it's an aged out Clark Kent, or whatever it is. And then you can tell those stories alongside the other ones, but it exists in quote unquote canon. It actually was in the DNA, but then once you say all these universes have collided and then they just kind of created one world, then you can't really play those ideas anymore.
And
One of the reasons why canon is so important is because me as the fan, I am invested in it. Marvel tried this thing at one point in the 90s called the New Universe, and I think the Star brand came out of that and was highly connected to Quasar, by the way. And what happened was it did not sell well. Yeah, Starfire was not connected, by the way, but it did not work well because we weren't invested in that world. So they kind of they tried to bring over some things from that universe into Marvel and keep it going, because we were invested into the Marvel canon, and that's where we wanted to continue being. And that's what this is all about, is canon and the investiture of the fans within it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was well said. Yeah. So where are we at? Let's pontificate our final views on canon. So we haven't heard from Todd Mulrooney in a while. So how do you feel about all this? Let's just sum this up.
Ultimately, the characters that are beloved are not going to be messed with enough, or they won't be messed with in the way you think. So they won't ever like age, but getting stories once in a while where they do that, guess what? It's fresh. If they did it all the time, it wouldn't be as fresh. Too much of one thing is not good. You know what I mean? If we had, for instance, Dark Knight Returns, the second one was garbage. Even the third one, the Master Race one, didn't like. But it wasn't because I wasn't interested in going back and delving into that universe. It just wasn't well written. So um, nothing beats a well written story. Doesn't matter when it is, or where it is, or what they do to the character. If it's well written and well drawn, nothing beats it.
Yeah, I agree. So how do you feel about that, DeWolf?
Well, without canon,
But how would you sum this up about the canon and all that?
right. Without canon, you don't have story depth, and you don't have a fulfilled fan base, and that's where the big media are today. They have to deal with that problem. Do they continue down the road they're going? Do they take a different route because they have a canon? Independent comics now being produced have to set where they're going to be. I think they need to address it now. This idea: are they going to maintain a canon? Are they going to continue something? Do they have an end point to their story, or are they developing the route where if their story does take off, are they going to be able to continue their character, and what are they willing to do with their own canon? That's where I'd leave it with.
Yeah, I agree. Draken.
Yeah, I think canon is very important, but there's also various aspects of like we didn't even cover how Star Wars used to handle canon, which is there's George Lucas's canon, there's the lore master's canon, there's the
Yeah.
video canon, there's the fanon, there's like 8 different layers of canon there, and what you subscribe to. So it's just what canon do you subscribe to? And it's only important because you need for that depth, for that connection, and for when you're talking to someone, when you go, well, that's not in canon. It's like you need to know what you're talking about. And if you don't have that what you're talking about, you really can't discuss the universe. And it breaks down how you're able to relate to each other and to the work itself.
Wow. Yeah, that was pretty good. How about you, Chester?
The only reason you have fans for a thing is because of the canon. It grows together. It grows from each other. As you progress forward, if you decide to mess with the canon, and even worse yet, the core of the character, you're going to cut off the fans you've already made, and in order to try to gain new fans. Now, this is something that many people have tried, and it usually fails. What needs to be balanced and juggled, if you would rather look at it like that, is taking the canon, which gave you your fans from the beginning, and progressing it forward in such a way that you're bringing new people on board. This is the key. I would think for me, that's my suggestion. But my overall idea about this entire conversation is really, I think we all agree that don't mess with the core value of the character.
Yeah.
Canon can itself be adjusted as time goes by, as long as you're not messing with the core. Because if we're trying to be successful with something and try to keep something that is becomes a legendary thing, like say a Spider-Man, it needs to keep that desperately. And we've seen them do this very successfully over the past 50 years with Spider-Man quite well. And it's only recently that I think that they've really been digging at the core value of Spider-Man himself. And they're doing it, unfortunately, for political purposes. And this is really where the conversation, I think, is coming from.
Yeah,
in my opinion.
I see when I was younger and I would read these comic books, to me they were just stories. I never really thought too much deeper on how they related to the other thing. So if I was reading the Fantastic Four, I just read it and I accepted it for what it was. I never had expectations that they could potentially contradict themselves, or that there was this bigger canon that existed. I just kind of accepted it as it went along monthly. So I never asked, as a reader, as a young kid, I didn't really read comic books as an older. When I did age out, I did exactly what the comic thing was supposed to be. I read comics from a certain time to a certain time, and then I stopped reading them. It wasn't until I was an adult that Pacific Comics and some of the more adult comics, I started rediscovering those and then got back into comics. But it wasn't really like the superhero stuff. It was more of stuff that was adult oriented. So for me, it was always, I don't, it's a lack of a better term, one and dones, but they were kind of one and dones. And I didn't have any expectation that this was going to affect anything else down the line. If they brought in, like, the Fantastic Four had Spider-Man as, a guest star or something, then it was just another adventure that was happening in that 22 pages. It wasn't like I brought in, like, oh, I was reading Spider-Man in this book and now he's in Fantastic Four and he's not referencing that he didn't bring home dinner to Aunt May. I never had those kind of expectations. I never had anything like that. I just accepted it kind of at face value how it was delivered. But I think people now kind of ask themselves those questions. It's like, well, if Peter is in this book and I was reading Spider-Man over here, how did he get to this point? And how much time has passed in between and things like that. And just for me as like, I guess, still holding on to the childlike joy of reading comic books, I think for me, some of the canon and getting hung up on this takes the fun away. You guys are definitely a different generation. You're saying that this is the stuff that compels you. This is the stuff you look forward to and that you want to read. But for me, it almost becomes the opposite. To me, I would rather kind of read a comic book and have it be a one and done and have my level of commitment towards the story or the series or whatever, just be that I don't have to actually know what this part of the universe is doing and how it affects this part of the universe. Like, I just kind of want to be, one and done. I just want to enjoy it and then move on.
Yeah, but you lived the canon, Art. You lived it.
I am.
A later generation, well, I mean, seriously, for me as well, right?
Yeah.
Later generation is interacting with the canon. Right.
Exactly.
And when they are looking at, well, where's this thing or this connection between this point and that point or whatever other minutia that they've gotten themselves into. Well, for me, that's passion. That's love of a thing.
Yeah.
That's not angst or hate.
You did bring up that thing where I don't want to know where all the connections are.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
But as a reader, I don't want to know where all those connections are either. I just want to read the story. And that's one of the problems with comics too, is they interconnect things too much.
Yeah, I agree. And that's kind of where I was going with it. This is why this is a complex idea, because I think they both have merits, but I think the one, if there is canon and it's changing and it's you're always adding to the canon and that everything kind of interrelates to itself, because the canon isn't just the canon of like the Batman universe. The canon is also how it relates to the Justice League and how it relates to the Superman universe and all these other things. So it almost becomes, to me personally, it becomes you cannot fulfill the expectations. It is a flawed idea that you can never ever deliver to everybody in this way, because there's always going to be people that are disappointed and they're going to say, well, that's not canon, or this. They have these expectations and these storylines that they've kind of built into their own heads of how it should be, versus accepting the book as it kind of is and how it's put in front of you. So I think your expectations are a lot differently. You're going in with a lot more expectations in a book that has a lot of canon and has a lot of history to it than you would more in just a Batman adventure that was more of a one and done.
I should correct myself real quick. When I say that I don't like the connections as much, I mean that if I'm reading a Batman story and it's in the Batman comic, then generally I want to finish that story and read the entire story in the Batman comic, not have to go over to Superman comic and then come back to Batman, then go over to Catwoman, then go over to Green Lantern, and then
that's an
to
entirely
Batman.
different issue. Yeah. So, but this thing with canon too is actually happening with these new readers, because you've got people seeing Justice League and the MCU, and they're coming out of the theaters, or they're walking into the comic shop. This is happening, and they want a book. They don't know where to start. If they do pick up a book, it's not like what they saw, because what they saw is actually working on older stories and older canon, and so the new things aren't related. They don't know where to start. They don't. And so that's a problem now. If you don't stick with the canon, you lose the characters and stuff, And
so
one more thing,
introductory primer.
Yeah, and one more thing, I can't say this without this point, and I think we can all agree on this. I think I have one point I think that we can absolutely agree. I hope you guys can go ahead and voice this after I'm done, but I think we should also acknowledge the fact that the 12-pound Napoleon artillery piece was the most successful cannon in history.
I agree. Although the 88s were pretty successful in their duties as well, but yeah,
true.
Okay,
I'll give you that. But that's good. Yeah, we can resolve to that. Say that at least.
We could. Yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. Yeah, I mean, this is a pretty interesting idea, because I'm definitely coming. I think there's a couple points of view, and I'm definitely coming from a different place. But I do understand the value of the other, where it can be very compelling if, like, oh, how does this relate to this? Or how does this story enter into this contemporary situation that's happening now? So I do understand that there are merits to, the canon and continuing, keeping that canon intact. It just seems like a pretty monumental task for any publishing company to keep going in any kind of coherent way. It seems like it's set up, or it's doomed to fail on some level, or you're not going to meet expectations.
Right. Yeah.
As someone that had to do it, I don't think it's that hard. I actually went
just professionalism. Yeah.
Yeah, I have never read a Green Lantern book before, and I went through it, did research, figured out what books that you need to read to figure out to get a view from like the beginning of the character to the end of the character. It was only like maybe 40 books that you needed to read, and I found that all out by just doing some research. And the same is true of like Batman and Superman too.
I think it really depends on your editor. So if you were a writer and you came in and you're going to write, Green Lantern, not only do you have to understand the entire Green Lantern universe coming in, you actually have to learn the entire DC universe. This is quite a bit for somebody that might just be coming in on a 6-issue story arc. That you have like X amount of decades worth of work that you have to bone up on, so you know how to write these things. I think that it would be easier if you didn't have people bouncing around on books as much as you do now, and they could write longer runs on comics. But that's a lot to ask, and I think it can work based on if you had an editor that completely understood what was expected of you and that could basically steer your reading or your research and tell you what you needed to know. But that's a lot of fortuitous. That's like really knowing where you're going to go and where you're going to be a year, 2 years in the future. And that's even if that same person is going to be writing that book. So that it takes a lot of like forethought. And also, just as a monthly guy, it takes the fun out of it, because you can't turn on a dime. You can't just kind of make things up. And if something's not working, you're not just invested for a month, you're actually invested into it for a year or whatever. So then you have to change this canon idea that you set up, for the next year, that you now have to adjust that and constantly keep readjusting that. So what we're asking isn't that easy to have happen on a monthly basis with, I don't know, 25, 30, 50 comic books that you're putting out every month.
Can I make a suggestion? Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
And I'll make the suggestion with an analogy. Take a look at the tabletop role-playing world, say Dungeons and Dragons, right? D&D. Now, what they have, right, as an example, they put out a core set of rule books that have all the information you need regarding what this is. And then they have a whole bunch of other things that come after, often third-party stuff. In some cases, hundreds of things that come out that add all kind of information, all kind of stuff. And then they will come out with an update and a rule set. And then it continues with all these crazy, interesting ideas and things, and the story continues. And of course, what I'm trying to say is, in comic books, you could do the same thing. You can have an introductory primer, meaning, hey, you want to get into comic books? Read this, right?
Yeah,
and the rest of the world does this all the time.
Wait. I just want to like hammer what Chester is saying. So this is kind of back to your like earlier idea where you have a line of books that is for a younger group, then you have a line of books that is more for like continuity or universe oriented stuff, or things that actually follows more of a natural progression to life, where you can have characters age out and all those other things. And then you could possibly have an Elseworlds tale as well.
Well, what you said, Art, the fact that it's hard work to actually maintain that continuity and stuff and have that editor involved. The rest of the world does this all the time. They go through training, they go through learning new techniques, learning old techniques, going to school, all these things. I hate to slam the artist a little bit, or the people working in the mainstream comic works, but it's hard work to maintain your profession.
Yeah, but you're talking about also editors that might not stay there they might stay there for a year or 2 years. You have personality changes, personnel changes. You have people coming and going. And also what Chester was saying about the role-playing game, that's one universe. What the DC and Marvel universe is, it's not just one universe. Each one of those characters has their own universe. So you have the Batman universe, you have the Superman, you have Spider-Man, you have all these different universes. And then you have how the universe works as a whole, how they interact in that one cohesive DC universe or Marvel universe. So I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm just saying it's a pretty monumental task.
D&D has 7 universes offhand, by the way.
What's that?
Guy that can
D&D has 7 different universes just off the top of my head.
Oh, you're talking about D&D?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
But the guy that can figure all those things out and put them together is the guy that creates the new technology, or the doctor for the new cure for something else.
Okay, so D&D has how many different universes, and how
at least 7.
How diversified are they from each other?
Oh, anything from very low magic to high magic games to dark horror universes. It's quite diverse, actually. Yeah.
But you don't have like sci-fi mixed with like.
Oh no, we got sci-fi too.
Okay.
Yeah, but I'm just saying,
it's crazy, Art.
It is crazy, and I think DeWolf and I agree on this very much. I think he and I are looking at it from more of a boss type of view, an actual business point of view. You can take and manage everything, no matter how much personnel you change, because there is a standard rule. This is what our industry does, and if you're coming in, this is part of you taking that job. Right, you have to maintain continuity. Things need to be kept moving forward properly. Editors need to do their job, and we all know that one of the big problems that's going on right now is the editors are dropping the ball hardcore. Right, and we can get into the lack of writing, or the too on the nose insertion of politics, or the quality of art. We can get into all that stuff, but it really comes down to the bosses first and foremost.
I agree. I agree 100%. And I would just add to that, who would these people be? Like the leadership, nothing against anybody that's in these positions right now, but you would have to have a vision already. It's kind of like oh my gosh, I'm blanking on his name. The guy that took over DC and basically took DC into the modern age in the 60s. So when he took like the Flash, the Flash from, where he had the Mercury helmet and all that stuff, and then they made him more science based. And then, we took it from the Justice Society to the Justice League. So he basically had a mandate that all those core characters were going to be made into a contemporary. They were going to be made contemporary. They were going to be changed. The idea, like, of a guy running fast was still going to be there, but it was going to be this new guy, Barry Allen. And then there was going to be this guy that's still the Atom, but it's going to be Ray Palmer. You know what I mean? And so he made the whole new mandate it was going to be science-based. The DC universe was going to be all science-based, and then he mandated that to everybody. And so then they created at the time, the modern DC universe. So Justice League or Justice Society went to the Justice League, which sounds more contemporary. So they have done stuff like this, but I would just say you would have I wish I could. Carmine Infantino, no, that's not his name. I can't remember the guy's name, but if you had somebody like that, or you had a Stan Lee, you had those kind of people, I totally agree. I think you could do something like this. If you had a guy that was charismatic, that had a clear overview of where everything was going to be, and he could articulate that to all his editors and people that would be executing these plans and stuff like that, and you could put all this stuff in writing, so even if somebody was to leave, that they could pass that on to new people coming in, art directors, editors, things like that, then you could. But you would have to have such a clear vision of where you wanted to go. And you would have to, like, it would take a year to 2 years just to come up with this plan. You know what I mean? And write it all out and to execute I mean, not execute it, but just to create the idea, and then to create it in a realistic way that with all these obstacles and things, these realities that would happen along the way, that you would not alter the canon, that new canon, that canon would stay there. But you would also have to build in that there could be some variables if there was trouble. You know what I mean? If you had to alter things because some things aren't selling well and some things, are doing better. So you would have. This is.
It is, but we do not do things because they are easy, but because they are hard.
Amen, brother.
Amen.
I think from the creator angle, what your articulation there, Art, is good, and it expresses how it's such a challenge to do, and I can see how it's such a challenge because of the way that the industry is operating right now. Not so much that it can't happen, because it's more coming down to the fact that they don't want superstar artists or superstar writers or any superstars, and so they can't build that rapport with the characters, so they can't get used to them. They can't build up those good stories. I just don't like.
That was great, yeah. And also, it's because their focus is on a lot of other things. But if their focus was purely on what we're talking about, creating really good canon and creating characters that not just resonate in the contemporary here and now, but also can possibly grow 20 years from now, 30 years from now. Where are they going to be? All of these things. It can happen. I'm not saying it can't, but who would be this person, and what corporation in this contemporary setting would even let that person do that anymore? The reason Stan Lee could get away with it is because that company was dying. They didn't give a crap about it. They threw up a Hail Mary pass and said, "Hey, Stan, do whatever. We don't care anymore. We're signing off." And even when what's his, God, I want to say Carmine Infantino. It probably was Carmine. When he came in, it was like the industry was dying. Like DC, whoever owned them at the time, I don't know if it was Warner Brothers or whoever, they were like, "We don't care. You have to do something." So at that point, you have nothing to lose. So do you guys I know we have to wrap this up, but this is kind of a new question I'm going to ask everybody. Do you think this could happen? Do you think that in the current state of, like Warner Brothers owning DC, Disney owning Marvel, do you think we could ever get this kind of coherent canon?
I do. I just don't like that they keep on pawning it off as if the readers are incompetent and can't do the research, can't figure it out. They keep on saying it's too confusing to new readers, which is so untrue. Like, I think everyone, if they wanted to pick up a book, they would go and pick up the book, and they would, if they found an industry, they would go and do the research to figure out what it's all about and everything like that, and they would go and look at those old stories, because that's what happens in every single other medium.
Yeah.
You find a book that you're interested in, you go and look at the old books and you read those.
That's
you
right.
watch Star Trek, you go watch the original series. You watch Star Wars, you go and pick up the original trilogy. You do it with everything.
That's right.
It's just a way to it's way to shift the blame of why they're doing bad onto the reader rather than taking it on themselves and doing better.
Well, that's kind of what I was getting at, is that in this climate, do you think that a corporate overlord like Disney or Warner Brothers would actually give the Dido that, like, carte blanche, like, do whatever it takes, like, and then the Dido would say, well, it's going to be 2 years, and I need this kind of brain trust, and I need this kind of money. Do you think the corporate overlords would actually agree to that? Do you think that this could actually happen in today's climate?
And last time it happened, it was because of failing.
If one guy was willing to try it, and there was cha-ching, then yes, Art, it would rock the whole industry.
And besides, it's just forward thinking. It's just long-term planning. All businesses do this, right?
I don't think it would happen. Just to be honest, I think you would have to have the corporation be behind you to give you the confidence and to give you the resources, money, time, all those things to actually do it right. We had a soft reboot of the DC New 52, which was the closest I think we've had to any of these ideas in a while. And I believe the mistake that they made is that they didn't have a big enough overview, and they didn't have, I mean, like a good master plan, and that they didn't commit to the ideas that they had, and that it was a soft reboot. I think if they were going to do this, for the lack of confusion, they should have just said it's a hard reboot, so that everything from that moment on would be new canon. I mean, like we were saying, the values of each one of these characters would stay there, but it would all be new canon from there on. Because with the soft reboot, everybody was scratching their head. What is canon? What isn't? We don't know what is, going on here. Is this the Deathstroke that we knew before the New 52, or is he a new Deathstroke? So DC was basically cherry picking what was a hard reboot and what was soft.
They didn't nail down their cosmology. You're right.
In one way though, Art, Kevin Feige's already done it.
Exactly. And that's why it's successful, because there is an overview, and that they're very methodical about doing this. So they go, well, this is this phase, this is this phase. So then they can actually physically, they can put teams on phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, and that they can actually have, like, this is on the front burner, this is on the back burner, and so on and so on. So they can prioritize how things are going to go with kind of an overview of maybe 20, 30 years down the line. And you're seeing all this stuff come to fruition, and they've contradicted themselves at times, but it's all within a fairly forgivable, realm. You know what I mean?
And the model's already there, and you've got these big companies, Marvel and DC, absolutely not even using the model and just failing.
I just want to say one thing though, and this is back on what I was saying before: resources, time, and money. Kevin Feige has $1 billion at his disposal. He has a corporation that is behind him 100%, and he has a team that he can cherry pick and he can bring in the best of the best. So he has all those things going for him. And I think it can be done in comic books, but it would have to be the perfect storm of the Kevin Feige, phenomenon. It would either have to have a corporation that just decided to look the other way and just not care about this and let somebody go in there and basically do what we're talking about, or it would take 100% of support from the corporate overlords to make it happen.
If you were to ask me if I would take on this job, if I was in that position and if I would make all these changes and everything, I would say no. And it's for
I'd do it in a heartbeat, dude.
The reason I'd say no, the reason though, is because you're either going to be unsuccessful and they're going to pull the plug, or you're not going to be successful fast enough, so they'll pull the plug, or you'll be successful and they'll kick you out, and you'll have wasted your time. So there's no point in you actually doing it.
Yeah, because somebody else will want to come in and claim your success as theirs. And I mean, this is probably the best pontificators we've ever done. I know I keep saying this, but these are not easy answers,
Let's not overlook where we're at today, because I'm starting my own. You're working on your stuff, and Todd's working over here with Terrific, and it's exactly what they're doing with this new character Thor. Right. So this is already happening. We already have people that have decided to step out and do some things, and it's going to be exciting.
I think it's easier when you're creating things fresh. So if you're starting off fresh and you don't have the baggage and you don't have like 70 years or 60 years of history and expectation, I think it's kind of easier, and not to totally give Kevin Feige the pass, but when he brought this into a cinematic universe, there were no expectations. There was the baggage for people like us that knew the core IPs, but as far as the majority of people, they had no expectations and they didn't know these universes. So they were like when I was a kid, the analogy when I was a kid, that's how these movies are working for the average person. They go in there, they watch a movie, and then they go home. You know what I mean? Their investment isn't any more than me reading a 20-minute comic book and then moving on. So,
but he probably also had a guarantee for 7 years or something like that he could do anything within the 7 years before they would do anything to him. So
but I'm talking about more from a fan point of view, that the reason the Marvel Cinematic Universe worked is because there weren't expectations and that people weren't going in with 60 years of baggage. Like I said, we were, but the average going movie audience was not. So
even with that though, Art, think about this. You'd have the average audience which didn't really know, so they're experiencing it for the first time. Great. But even for us, sure, they did change some things here or there, but if you think about it, they kept the core values of the character until we hit the Captain Marvel movie. Right. And then when did we start making noise? The Captain Marvel movie. Right. So they did keep us in mind. And that's why they've had the success, because you should never cut your arm off to spite your face. You should never do this. And that's what many people are doing. And Marvel, Kevin Feige particularly, understood that he should never do that. You must keep your core in order to move forward, and look at the success he's had because of it.
Wait, is your arm connected to your face?
Tribute.
That was actually supposed to be nose, but I was trying to make a writer joke.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, that's it. I mean, I just think it's I think they did a great job with that up until that Captain Marvel movie, where they really went away from what was actually canon, what was actually the core value, because they went with the I think it was the Kelly Sue DeConnick version of Captain Marvel instead of what we know as Miss Marvel. Right? They abandoned it.
Well, I had conversations with people, and they were talking about they didn't like the way the Bruce Banner character was handled. They didn't like the way a lot of the Thor stuff was handled. So I've had these conversations with people like ourselves, and everything wasn't like, oh, the Marvel Universe is, the cinematic universe is spotless. There have been conversations as well.
Well, sure. Well, of course, there's many little things that we who know about it will make points about. Oh, well, this isn't perfect. That isn't perfect. But in the end, it stuck to the core value, and this is why we love them so much. I mean, think about it. How many Marvel movies do you really, really not like?
Well, and the comics did the same thing. I mean, even the beloved Quasar, you have some issues that come up in there, and you say, what happened in this particular issue? Why did they bring in this character? Why did they do that with it? It happens within comics as well, and you wonder why in the world would they do that with this character? But they realize that they read the letters page, and then they go ahead and get back to the original core concepts and the characters.
Yeah. So always stay with the core values, and these you can I guess we're in agreement. If you stick with the core values, you can probably go in any direction as long as the integrity of those core values is still intact.
And love your fans. Love them. Pet them daily. Pamper them.
Yes.
Take
2.5 hours are 2.5 hours.
Yeah, take them out for coffee,
Yeah, exactly.
I always come back to something I said in the probably very first show we did is allow for experimentation. Don't be so clingy to the IP and protecting it for the TV show or the movie, and allow writers and artists to team up and take a character in new areas without, you don't have to, like you said, you don't have to destroy anything. You can grow and progress, and if it's a good story, word of mouth will get out, and it'll become a hot book. And you know what? There's plenty of these books that maybe no one's ever tried that are really well written, like Descender is a very good book.
Oh, that is a good book.
And I'm sure not that many people have read it. So if you let people go outside of their box a little bit and don't expand the box. Don't keep it so tight that it can't be done, or you're saying, well, you can't do that because next week, who cares what's going on? The movies are already so different. Why are you protecting the IP so much that you're not allowing writers and artists to team up? Because Hollywood does. Why haven't you got to the point where, okay, guess what? Hollywood doesn't listen to us. When we control a movie, look what happens. It's like, like Wonder Woman can beat Steppenwolf. She could beat Steppenwolf any day.
Yeah, and easily. Yeah.
Right. So why not just let the comics and the artists and the creators go a little bit? Like, let that 80s and 90s era come back. And I don't mean the art and all the in your face stuff. I just mean the exploration. Because
I totally agree, and I would just add to that, and this is what I keep saying as well. Incentivize these creators, give them a stake in their creative IPs. So encourage them to create new villains. Your hero is only as good as your villain. If you want to see a new dimension to Batman, create a villain that brings that dimension out. Encourage your creators to do this. And the reason you don't see a lot of creators do this is because they don't want to give these corporations their ideas, because they're not going to be compensated for them. So they always hold back, and they'll probably put out an indie book with those ideas or whatever. And they're not going to give their first and foremost ideas to Marvel and DC, because they're not going to be compensated. The past has shown that time and time again.
Oh,
so
Mike Miller was very honest about that. Yeah.
So if you could change that dynamic, and if you did one thing and just mandate, stay with the core values, like we were saying, and then encourage everybody, not with just, hey, we want you to do this, but we're going to pay you more, and you're going to co-own any of these villains that you come up with in like, I don't know, a 60-40. I don't know how, but be very, very generous with these people that you're asking to do this. And you're going to see some killer villains coming out of the woodwork. You don't have to keep creating heroes. We have enough of those. We have to keep creating villains. Even the Marvel Universe, the biggest lacking aspect to that has been their villains. Thanos was the only character that seemed complex enough to be, entertaining, and strong, not only physically powerful enough, but also mentally, smart enough to be able to take on, the Avengers. So I think that the key really is to villains, and that's all I had to say on that.
And Whiplash.
There's also the fear aspect that these writers probably aren't writing to the best of their capability because they don't want to lose their job either.
Oh yeah,
So
and there's
you
just
create-
that kind of money. The corporate lords aren't going to go, "Hey, we want you to create the next Joker. We're going to give you 50% of it."
Art, I think maybe we should save this topic for another show.
Yeah.
Because
Yes.
where is all the creativity is a Pontificators unto itself.
Yes. Okay, so I think we, once again, like I said in the description, we've talked this to death. So that's what we do, and we drive these subjects into the ground, and that's good fun. And you know what, you guys, we have been here for a long time, but it really does feel like we just started this thing. So thanks to all my guests. Thank you guys for coming in and being so amazing. Thanks to Zach. I know he took off so he could be part of Mike S. Miller's auctions, and I don't blame him. That's a lot of fun as well. And thanks to everybody in the chat. This has been our best chat too. You guys have been with us every step of the way, and have contributed a lot of great observations to this. So yes, thank you guys so much. And do you guys have any parting shots, any plugs? Where can we find you?
Pontificators is the most exciting and invigorating stream that you can possibly come onto on a Friday night.
I think it's getting better. I think we're gelling, and we're starting to kind of figure out the rhythms and beats of each other. So this is really good. So
and also.
Oh, go ahead.
And also, Flying Sidecar Press is leaning towards getting the free ash can out in the month of December. And also, since it is the month of December, we're looking at something special for what I may be calling Frostimus. But that'll be for you to find out later what's happening with that.
Well, there you go. How about you, Todd? What do you have?
Geez, I don't even have a guest for Sunday's show.
Todd is falling down and he can't get up.
Can't hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, dude.
Oh, yeah. I don't even have a guest for Sunday's show because no one's gotten back to me, so I'm a little concerned. So I don't even know what.
So I can go to bed early. Is that what you're telling me?
Do you want to skip a week?
Sweet, dude. I never get enough sleep.
I think Chester's in favor of that. and look forward to Todd's new Thor book. He's killing it on that book. Behind the scenes, he showed us he showed me some of the images, and they're pretty killer. So that book is going to be amazing. So and then Chester, you have the drawn and quartered Ultimate Edition, right?
I do. Well, we have a lot of things over on Fanspeak, and of course, I see many familiar faces here, and I see some I don't know. So, for those of you who are not part of our community over on Fanspeak, definitely go either to www.fanspeak.live or go to Chester Busby on YouTube, and you'll find all our content. But we do something pretty much every day, and we do, of course, have the Drawn and Quartered Ultimate Edition, which is absolutely awesome. And of course, as you heard Todd Mulrooney mentioning, he is the Indicom TV guy, and there are several people here that are part of what's going on with that, and I am as well. I do a Sunday show at 10 a.m. in the morning, usually, sometimes 11, called Coffee Akihabara, and I have a lot of fun with that. But most of the stuff that's on that channel is just created, uploaded videos, so definitely check it out.
Oh, very cool. Very, very cool. So I'm going to put in the comments a link to Chrono Mechanics. I should have done this earlier, but I didn't want this to... Wait, that's not it.
Are you sure you have enough time?
I just actually copied and pasted the wrong thing again. Here we go. Wait a minute. Why is that showing up? This is really weird. You know what? I'm going to skip that because I know you guys want to go. But where am I?
Buy Aaron Lopresti's Garbage Man.
Yes, buy that, and
Yeah.
I'm going to do this. So I think it's in the description as well. There's a link to the Chrono Mechanics Indiegogo page. It is live right now, and we're about our midway point on the campaign. So come by, check it out. If you like what you see, back a book. We just added a bunch of stretch goals to the campaign, and it's a killer mag. You guys check it out.
Did you add oodles
It
of
does look
doodles
cool.
too to it?
We have not, but we did find a bunch of Oodles books, so we have a couple more. So I may be doing something in the form of a Black Friday, Cyber Monday blowout. So
Cool.
thank you for that, Draken. Yes.
Yep.
All right, you guys. Well, have a great evening. Thank you so much, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.